Musashino City, 2:40 a.m. A quiet home has been turned into a blood-soaked crime scene. Investigators examine the bodies, estimating the time of death at about 2 hours ago. Hosho Aiko tells us she died that night, in the spring of her 15th year. By 6:10 a.m., her body is sitting in the morgue, waiting for an autopsy. Suddenly, the sheet twitches. Sudo slams his hand against the desk, demanding that Kochigawa explain how a dead girl is breathing again. Kochigawa explains that a pulse was detected during rounds, leading to a successful revival. She notes that Aiko shows no signs of brain trauma, and even her crippled left arm is perfectly fine. The doctor tells Sudo that words like luck or miracle don't even begin to cover what happened. Sudo can only stare in disbelief. He sits by her bed later that night, calling the situation completely abnormal. Inside Aiko's mind, there is only a silent, crushing darkness. She feels like she's sinking into a freezing ocean, desperately calling for her parents. A vision of them appears in a warm light, reaching down to save her, but a shadowy figure blocks her path, telling her she's not going anywhere. The shadow grabs her arm and pulls her back into the abyss. The vision shatters. 3 days later, Aiko snaps awake in a dark hospital room, gasping for air. She's alone, her breathing the only sound in the quiet space. She realizes her left arm is heavily injured and wrapped in thick bandages. She steps onto the cold floor, her body feeling incredibly heavy. She reaches for the light switch, convinced she must still be dreaming. She peeks out the door, but the hallway is dark and completely empty. She calls out to see if anyone is there, but no one answers. Panic starts to set in as she slumps onto a bench, terrified of being alone. Her mind retreats to memories of school and the last normal day she had. She remembers her piano teacher lecturing her about the importance of daily practice. She recalls hanging out with her friend Sachi before heading home late that night. Then the memory of the incident starts to bleed through. In the present, she hears the voice from her dream again, telling her she's stuck here. A sudden noise makes her jump, and she catches a glimpse of herself in the glass. She reaches out to touch her reflection, her hand shaking. She has to know what's under the bandages and starts frantically tearing them off. She tells herself over and over that this can't be real. The final wrap falls away, revealing a massive 3-fingered claw. The realization hits her. This isn't a nightmare. In a fit of pure terror, she smashes the monster limb through the window. Kochigawa hears the crash and comes running to the observation room. Aiko collapses on the floor, staring at the inhuman thing attached to her shoulder. At 3:10 a.m., Sudo is at a warehouse where 3 employees have been found murdered. A flashbang goes off, signaling the start of a police operation. The tactical team moves in for a full breach, weapons drawn. Sudo takes charge of the tactical team, ordering them to move in and neutralize the target immediately. The mission is a success. The suspect is down, and the team calls for a containment vehicle to haul it away. With the operation wrapped up, they prepare to transfer the prey straight to Dr. Kochigawa for study. Sudo gets a call from Kochigawa with a major update. Aiko Hosho has finally regained consciousness. He rushes through the medical facility, shouting for the doctor, who seems more annoyed than relieved to see him. Kochigawa pulls up the security feed, telling Sudo that he needs to take a long, hard look at the girl. She explains that Aiko's injuries aren't just healing. Her mangled left arm has fully regenerated in just 3 days. The arm itself is a medical impossibility, bearing DNA that no 15-year-old girl should ever have. Sudo asks if the girl shares the same biological traits as their other samples, and the doctor confirms the similarities are striking. She tells him that Aiko's miraculous revival was actually triggered by whatever mutation is in that left arm. Despite her fragile appearance, Kochigawa officially labels Aiko as a dangerous and unpredictable threat. Concerned about a potential loss of control, she asks Sudo to take over the watch while she tends to her other patients. In the lower levels, laboratory workers struggle to move the heavy, fleshy specimen into Lab 3. The staff is visibly creeped out by the mass of flesh they're transporting, even though it's supposed to be dead. Suddenly, a wet squelching sound fills the elevator as something under the sheet starts to stir. They pull the cover back and realize too late that their prey is anything but neutralized. Unaware of the incident below, Kochigawa walks down a quiet hallway as Sudo enters Aiko's room. Sudo tries to be gentle, apologizing for waking her, but Aiko has no idea who he is. Kochigawa watches them from a distance, her expression unreadable. Aiko realizes she's strapped down to the bed, the cold truth of her situation finally setting in. Sudo explains his role as the chief investigator, but Aiko is too distracted by her mutated limb to care. She demands to know what happened to her, but when Sudo tries to explain, she screams that she doesn't want to hear it. She begs him not to tell her parents what she looks like yet, fearing their reaction to her new form. Aiko talks about her love for the piano, and how the sight of her monstrous hand would shatter her parents' hearts. She breaks down in tears, admitting she used to hate her lessons, and wondering if this arm is some kind of cosmic punishment. As she cries about never being able to play again, Sudo realizes she's just a scared kid, not the threat the lab claimed. He tries to comfort her, reminding her that she's still a normal girl, regardless of what's happened. The moment is shattered when Kochigawa kicks the door open, armed with submachine guns and looking frantic. She warns Sudo that the facility is in deep trouble and that they need to move immediately. She tosses a weapon to a shocked Sudo, while Aiko watches in terror, wondering if this is a real-life nightmare. Left alone, Aiko questions if she's even in a hospital anymore after seeing those weapons. The hallway is a scene of absolute carnage, with the staff calling for an elite armed unit to contain the mess. Kochigawa surveys the blood-spattered walls, knowing they can't afford to lose any more personnel. Outside, the sun begins to rise over a peaceful town that has no clue about the horror unfolding nearby. Aiko huddles on her bed, feeling completely abandoned in a world of strangers and violence. She just wants to see her parents again, but then she hears heavy, dragging footsteps approaching her cell. A massive, terrifying shadow falls over her as she whispers for her mother and father. A grotesque, multi-eyed monster looms in the doorway, its many mouths twitching. Aiko screams in pure horror, begging the creature to stay away from her. She's paralyzed with fear, never having seen anything so repulsive or terrifying in her life. Her mind flashes back to the night of the incident, when she first walked through her front door and called out to her family. She dropped her school bag in shock as she was greeted by the same monstrous sight waiting for her in the dark. Aiko stares into the darkness of the hallway, her heart pounding as she realizes the monster from her memories is right in front of her. The grotesque chimera monster looms over her bed, its many eyes and mouths twitching as it whispers that it knows her, because it saw her before. The sight of the creature's gore-slicked limbs triggers a visceral memory of her parents' final moments in their home. She screams as she realizes this is the same thing that slaughtered her family, the nightmare from 3 days ago, coming back to finish the job. Terrified and cornered, Aiko cries out, asking why this is happening to her and why her parents had to die. The monster reaches out a massive, fleshy hand toward her, its intentions clearly lethal as it closes the distance. Aiko cowers, her mind racing with the certainty that she's about to be killed just like the others. She shuts her eyes tight, bracing for the impact of the monster's strike as it lunges at her. The creature pauses, noting that Aiko has the same scent as it does, just before her left arm begins to throb with a mind of its own. In the hallway, Sudo realizes the monster has breached Aiko's room and sprints toward her, weapon at the ready. Aiko is hysterical, tears streaming down her face as she's caught between the monster and her own mutating body. Sudo bursts into the room, shouting her name as he prepared to confront the beast, but he stops dead in his tracks at the sight of Aiko's mutated left arm, which has already lashed out and pinned the monster to the wall. Aiko looks on in horror at the pile of gore she's created, wishing she had just stayed in the darkness instead of seeing what she's become. She tells herself it has to be a hallucination, a bad dream she just can't wake up from. Blood drips from her transformed limb as she stares at the ceiling, her mind finally fracturing under the weight of the morning's revelations. In the aftermath, Aiko is moved to a more secure lab, her breathing shallow and ragged as the researchers observe her. The room is filled with the steady beep of monitors as they track her vitals and the activity of her mutated arm. Outside, the deputy director of the facility arrives to survey the carnage left by the escaped chimera. Sudo is reprimanded for the security breach, but he tries to take full responsibility for the chaos. Inside the lab, Aiko is sitting up, still strapped down and terrified of her own body. She's trembling, her mind replaying the moment she crushed the monster, unable to reconcile that power with who she used to be. Sudo and Kochigawa enter her room, and she immediately starts demanding answers about what's happened to her. She screams at them, desperate to know why her arm looks like a monster, and why they're keeping her here. Kochigawa asks her if this morning was the first time her arm had ever changed like that. Aiko is indignant, asking what they're planning to do with her and why she's being treated like a prisoner. The doctor explains that while Aiko's DNA is normal, her left arm contains cells that resemble the very monsters she's terrified of. She reveals that they call these creatures chimeras, and that Aiko is now inextricably linked to them. Aiko is horrified, asking if there are more of those monsters out there, and if they're the ones responsible for her parents' deaths. Sudo tells her they're taking her back to the scene of the crime to see if she can remember anything that might help them. Aiko fights them, screaming that she doesn't want to go back to the place where her life was destroyed. Sudo is firm, reminding her that she's still a suspect and needs to cooperate if she wants any answers. He waits by the transport van, sighing as he prepares for a very difficult day of investigation. Kochigawa hands over the responsibility of watching Aiko to Sudo, warning him to be careful. Aiko sits in the back of the van, her head down, accepting that her life as a normal girl is officially over. As the van drives through the city, she stares out at the urban landscape, feeling like a ghost in her own life. They finally arrive at her old neighborhood, the familiar streets now feeling alien and cold. Sudo leads her toward her house, telling her to keep her head up and face what's ahead. He apologizes for being harsh earlier, but he insists she needs to take a look inside. The house is sealed off with crime scene tape, the interior a wreck of shattered furniture and dried blood. Aiko walks through the ruins of her home, her body trembling as she remembers the calls for her parents that went unanswered. Sudo asks her what happened after she saw the chimera, but Aiko can only sob, claiming she doesn't know anything. Aiko collapses in the middle of her living room, her voice trembling as she tells herself she doesn't want to remember any of it. Sudo looks down at her, his usual sternness replaced by a moment of quiet understanding as he agrees to take her word for it. She stares at the bloodstains on the floor, the chilling reminders of where her family fell just days ago. When she tries to run toward the back of the house, Sudo catches her, telling her firmly that she isn't allowed to go any further. Her gaze drifts to her piano, which stands as a silent witness to the tragedy that destroyed her life. A memory flashes before her eyes. Her mother, smiling warmly, praising her talent as she played. She recalls the joy of her childhood, from playing on a toy keyboard to the admiration of her classmates during recitals. She even remembers the arguments her parents had about her lessons, memories that now feel precious and heartbreaking. Back in the present, she wonders when the last time was that she actually played for them, her heart heavy with regret. In a fit of despair, she slams her hands onto the keys, the discordant sound echoing through the empty, blood-spattered room. "I can't play the piano like this," she wails, her face contorted in agony as she confronts her new reality. Sudo stands by, unable to do anything but watch as the young girl's world continues to crumble around her. An officer pulls Sudo aside to report that a news team is outside, but Sudo tells them to just drive the reporters away. Aiko is left in the silence of the room, her spirit completely crushed by the weight of her grief. Outside the house, Sudo is ambushed by a pushy news crew demanding answers about the lack of public reports on the incident. He shuts them down and turns to his partner, admitting that Aiko is in no condition to provide any more information. Noticing the storm clouds gathering overhead, Sudo decides it's time to wrap things up and head back to the facility. He calls out to Aiko, only to realize with a shock that she has slipped away while he was distracted. He frantically searches the house, but the girl is nowhere to be found, leaving him alone in the ruins of her life. Aiko walks aimlessly through the streets of her neighborhood, her bare feet hitting the pavement as she tries to process her isolation. She thinks about the cold, clinical way the doctor and Sudo have treated her, feeling like nothing more than a test subject to them. As she looks down the empty street, the crushing realization hits her that she no longer has a home to return to. Her thoughts are interrupted by a familiar bark, and she looks up to see her friend, Sachio Takashima, standing just a few feet away. Sachio's eyes widen in absolute terror. To her, she's looking at a girl who was supposed to have been murdered along with her parents. Aiko stands there, frozen as the words, "You should be dead," hit her like a truck. Her best friend Sachio is hysterical, screaming through her tears because everyone told her Aiko was gone for good. Aiko begs her to stop, crying out that she's right there in front of her. Even Sachio's dog Taro seems to recognize her, and Aiko gives him a sad, thankful look. She starts to pet him, but a sudden twitch in her arm sends a jolt of panic through her. Sachio snaps, demanding to know why Aiko didn't call or come to her sooner if she was really alive. The anger fades into relief as Sachio pulls her into a tight, tearful hug. She welcomes her friend back, finally letting herself believe Aiko is really home. But then she notices the weird arm and the cuffs, and Taro starts growling like he senses something dangerous. Aiko's heart rate spikes as the dog lunges, and she has no idea how to stop what's coming. In a split second, blood sprays across the wall as Aiko's monstrous arm lashes out on its own. Horrified by what she just did, Aiko bolts into the rainy streets while Sudo and his team close in. Sudo finds Sachio collapsed in the alley, hyperventilating from the shock. He leans over her, his expression cold and businesslike, despite the girl's trauma. He demands to know what she saw, but she's too busy trembling to give him an answer. The scene left behind in the alley tells the rest of the story for him. Sudo's team starts the cleanup under the cover of the rain, making sure no one else sees the aftermath. He realizes Aiko's left arm is active again, and this time, her friend's pet paid the price. He looks over the info on Sachio Takashima, noting how the arm acts completely independent of Aiko's will. The two have been friends since they were kids, which just makes the whole situation more of a mess. Later, Sudo sits Sachio down to give her the cold, hard facts. He straight up threatens her, saying if she goes public with this, they'll have to deal with her and her family. Sachio is in shock, unable to believe he's telling her to just forget Aiko ever existed. She starts sobbing, asking how he expects her to just wipe something like that from her memory. Sudo doesn't sugarcoat it, telling her she ran because she was scared, and that her old friend is officially dead. All she can think about is the old Aiko, and the contrast is tearing her apart. He tells her it's for her own good, and leaves her alone on the bench. As night falls over the city, the phones at the lab are already ringing off the hook. Kochigawa is on the line, having already heard that Sudo let the girl slip away. Sudo is clearly annoyed, but he can't argue with the fact that she escaped on his watch. Kochigawa tells him his softness is exactly what's pushing the girl into a corner. He snaps that he knows it's his fault, and promises to have her back within the hour. Meanwhile, Aiko is wandering the rainy streets alone, realizing she has nowhere left to run. She stubs her bare toe on the concrete, a tiny pain that almost feels like a wake-up call. Her stomach is cramping from hunger, and she stops to watch a news report about her family's murder on a display TV. She stares at her own life being reduced to a headline while she stands there like a ghost. An official stops and stares, wondering what this barefoot girl in a hoodie is doing out in a storm. Aiko feels like she's trapped in a different world where she doesn't even exist anymore. She ends up back at Sachio's place, staring up at the windows from the sidewalk. From the balcony, Sachio's dad calls out to her, telling her to come down for dinner and asking if she's still upset about the dog. But Sachio is upstairs in the dark, staring at the TV with empty eyes as the news plays. Sudo's threat and Aiko's crying face are all she can see, and the weight of it is crushing. Back at home, Sachio is clutching her head, unable to shake the image of her friend out of her mind. Outside in the pouring rain, Sudo and his team are keeping watch, knowing the girl is on the move. The heavy downpour at Inokashira Park washes over the empty signs, hiding the tragedy about to unfold. Aiko wanders through the park barefoot, looking like a ghost in the storm. She looks at the empty paths, haunted by memories of the times she and Sachi spent here. In those memories, they were just two normal girls, smiling and welcoming each other home. Now, Aiko is huddled on the ground, sobbing because she's the reason Taro is dead. Sachio finds her there, her voice trembling as she calls out to the girl she barely recognizes. Terror flashes in Sachio's eyes as she looks at what Aiko has become and calls her a monster. Aiko is desperate, screaming through her tears that this isn't her fault and she didn't want any of this. She looks down at her hand, seeing only a tool of destruction that she can't control. In a fit of self-loathing, she smashes a glass bottle against the ground, blaming the monstrous arm for everything. She collapses in the muck, her heart breaking under the weight of her own guilt. A brief vision of Sachi and Taro smiling back at her only makes the reality even harder to bear. The emotional pain is so overwhelming that dying seems easier than living through another minute of this. But then Sachi's voice cuts through the rain again, calling her name from under an umbrella. Aiko looks up, her face covered in dirt and tears, wondering why her friend would even come back. Sachio tells her she's been running all over the park trying to find her. Aiko can't understand why she still cares after seeing what that arm can do. Sachio admits she said some awful things and wants to apologize. But then she notices the arm twitching. Aiko yells at her to stay back, terrified that she'll lose control again. She tries to scramble away, begging Sachi not to get any closer. But Sachio stands her ground, refusing to run away from her best friend. Aiko stares at her in shock, unable to comprehend that kind of loyalty. She reminds Sachi that this hand killed her dog, but her friend doesn't flinch. Sachio reaches out and gently touches the monstrous claw, saying she cares about the girl more than her fear. She gives Aiko a small, warm smile, calling her a reckless crybaby, but a good person nonetheless. They share a desperate hug in the rain, Sachi insisting that, no matter what she looks like, Aiko is still Aiko. High above them, Pseudo and his team have the area surrounded, watching the scene through binoculars. The two girls sit on a bench together, finding a small moment of peace in the middle of a nightmare. For the first time, Aiko feels a flicker of hope as she looks at the one person who hasn't given up on her. Sachi holds the umbrella over them both, promising to stay by her side no matter what. Then, in a horrific flash, a massive spike erupts from the shadows and impales Sachio right in front of her. Aiko's face is instantly sprayed with blood, her eyes wide as the world turns into a nightmare. A grotesque chimera monster has emerged from the darkness, having struck Sachi down in a split second. The Atheos team is caught completely off guard, Pseudo's men shouting in confusion as the situation spirals. The creature begins to pull Sachio's body toward its many mouths, and Aiko can only watch in paralyzed horror. Pseudo draws his weapon and yells for Aiko to get away as his team opens fire on the beast. Sachio's body is tossed aside like a rag doll, hitting the wet ground with a thud. Aiko stares at her friend's lifeless eyes, her mind finally snapping as the reality of the loss hits home. Images of their life together flash through her head as her shock turns into a soul-crushing scream. She clutches her head in agony, her voice tearing through the rainy night as she loses herself to the trauma. Aiko grits her teeth, her face stained with blood and tears as she prepares to face the horror in front of her. Her monstrous left arm begins to pulse and shift, its claw-like fingers twitching with a mind of their own, while Pseudo watches from a distance. In the pouring rain, Aiko stands alone against the massive chimera monster. She screams for it to give back everything it took, her friend Sachio and her parents. Her voice cracks with pure desperation, begging the creature to stop stripping away her entire life. Suddenly, her arm erupts in a violent surge of power, transforming into a massive, veiny limb that dwarfs her small frame. Pseudo's jaw drops as he realizes the sheer scale of the change. As the arm reaches its full, terrifying size, a single thought hangs in the air. Just how much power does this thing hold? Without a second thought, Aiko dashes forward. Her giant clawed arm is a blur as it lunges at the creature, while Pseudo screams for her to stop. The massive claw slams into the chimera monster with a sickening impact, tearing through its fleshy mass as Aiko pours her rage into the strike. Her arm completely overwhelms the creature, shredding its form as she demands her life back in the middle of the storm. She lets out a final agonizing cry as she rips the monster apart, leaving its remains to dissolve in the mud. The fight ends as quickly as it started, and Pseudo stands frozen in the returning silence of the rain. Aiko's monstrous arm slowly begins to shrink back to its usual size, its surface still steaming and covered in the creature's remains. The adrenaline fades, leaving Aiko to collapse in the mud. She's exhausted and broken, staring into the puddles as the weight of what she's done hits her. Pseudo steps forward cautiously, calling her name into the darkness, but she doesn't move. She holds up her right hand, the human one, and stares at it as if she's seeing it for the first time. In a quiet, hollow voice, she asks the man behind her if she's still even human. Tears stream down her bloodied face as she looks up, desperate for any kind of reassurance that she hasn't lost herself completely. The scene shifts away from the rain to the cold, modern exterior of the Atheos building, where a top-secret report is being handed over. Inside, Dr. Kochigawa, a blonde woman in a white lab coat, studies the experimental findings with a clinical, detached interest. The data focuses on Aiko, who is now being held in a sterile facility, her monstrous arm heavily bound and restrained. A representative asks Kochigawa if the girl can actually be used, suggesting she should be classified as a level 4 hazard. Kochigawa seems more intrigued than worried, her analytical mind already calculating the girl's potential as Aiko remains trapped in her binds. Deep inside the facility, Aiko is strapped to a chair, completely isolated from the world outside. In a nearby office, officials discuss how she managed to hide in Inokashira Park without being spotted by any bystanders. A group of men in suits sit around a long board table, anxious about how much longer they can keep the public from finding out about the monsters. Representative Okuda, a man with a sharp gaze, suggests that Kochigawa and her team have been hiding a disturbing development from them. The men argue about the rumors of a new biological weapon, one that supposedly tore the monster in the park to pieces. Okuda doesn't deny it. Instead, he seems to enjoy the way the news has riled up the other researchers. He explains that the chimera's cell growth was unstable, causing the creature to dissolve after the fight. He orders the team to put more effort into securing the subjects and their research, leaving the mess for the police to clean up. The meeting breaks up with a reminder that the country's safety rests on their shoulders. Back in her cell, Aiko sits on the edge of a bed, her chains rattling as she stares at the ceiling, wondering if the rain has finally stopped. The days blur together in the windowless room, leaving her to question whether this is reality or just some lingering nightmare. She feels so disconnected that she can't even tell if she's alive or dead. And for a moment, dying quietly seems like the easiest option. The heavy door slides open with a mechanical click as Dr. Kochigawa walks in, accompanied by her assistants. The doctor asks Aiko how she's feeling, though she doesn't wait for an answer before delivering a message from the higher-ups. Kochigawa tells Aiko that they want her to join Atheos and use her power to fight the other monsters. She makes it clear that Aiko's only options are to join the assault team and prove her worth, or become nothing more than a lab sample for experiments. She explains that Atheos is a government-backed corporation working in secret to capture the chimera. When Aiko hesitates, Kochigawa insists that she can fight using her left arm, ignoring the girl's obvious trauma. She even goes so far as to call it sweet vengeance for the death of Aiko's friend. Aiko snaps, her voice full of pain as she tells the scientist she has no idea how she actually feels. But Kochigawa simply tells her she needs to decide what her life is going to be worth. Aiko screams in frustration, declaring she's done seeing blood and hurting people. To her, dying sounds better than continuing this nightmare. Dr. Kochigawa doesn't blink. She tells Aiko that without a will to fight, she's useless to them and will be shipped off to a national research center instead. Back in her room, Aiko stares at her bound, monstrous arm. Kochigawa gives her until morning to make a choice, learn to live with the arm, or essentially become a lab specimen until she dies. As the doctor walks away, she coldly reminds Aiko that the world she's fallen into was never a rational place to begin with. The scene shifts to a government office building drenched in rain, where the constant ringing of phones fills the frantic workspace. Sudo stands before his chief, who's casually smoking as he asks if Sudo understands just how badly things have gone south. Sudo takes the hit, accepting full responsibility for the casualties and losing their witness. The chief finds it odd that the higher-ups haven't chewed him out yet. With a cynical look, the chief suggests that to the people in charge, civilian lives are just a trivial detail they can ignore. Sudo looks away, wondering if this is really how a group that claims to serve justice is supposed to operate. His chief drops a bombshell, handing over a direct order to stop investigating the Houseo family and get back to basic duties. He tells Sudo to drop the Aiko case entirely, claiming it's for his own good. Meanwhile, Aiko lies curled up on her bed, her massive bandaged arm weighing her down both physically and mentally. She realizes the people in this facility only care about her as a research project. She even catches herself wondering why Sudo hasn't shown up to see her. Outside the room, Sudo is causing a scene, trying to push past a researcher who insists that entry is prohibited. He shouts through the door, desperate to get a message to Aiko, but the scientist tells him she can't hear a word through the soundproof walls. Safe inside her silence, Aiko feels like a complete nobody. She's convinced there's no place left for her in the world. Tears stream down her face as she blames herself for her friend Sachi's death. She's spiraling, convinced that she doesn't deserve to keep living. Alone in the dark, she huddles on the bed, wishing for everything to just end already. Outside the Atheos facility, the rain continues to pour over the cold, concrete structures. Kochigawa stands by a transport truck, looking frustrated as she mutters about how all their risks have seemingly amounted to nothing. She turns to Aiko, who is now being moved in shackles, and warns her that the next facility might not even let her keep her life. Sudo suddenly bursts onto the scene, refusing to let them take her. Kochigawa just sighs, reminding the poor guy that he's already been kicked off the case. He ignores her, begging for just one chance to talk to Aiko and talk some sense into her. Kochigawa shuts him down, telling him Aiko has already made her choice. Sudo can only watch, struggling against the guards, as Aiko prepares to be moved. Sudo drops a bomb. He's been taken off the case. He asks Aiko if she's really okay with never knowing who murdered her parents, trying to stir something inside her. Aiko is left alone with her thoughts. She's completely lost, wondering what she's even supposed to do with her life now. Sudo isn't letting her give up. He starts yelling, calling her a coward, and asking if her life really means that little to her. Memories of her family and her friend Sachio flash through her mind. Even now, she can hear Sachi's voice telling her that she's still the same Aiko. Aiko doesn't believe it. She's convinced there's no one left in the world who would actually care if she was gone. Sudo continues to bark at her as they load her into the transport van, reminding her that once she's dead, there's no turning back. The heavy doors slam shut, locking her into her own personal hell. Aiko's ready for everything to just end. But as the van pulls away, she hears Sudo screaming at the top of his lungs, begging her not to die. The words hit her hard. Tears start streaming down Aiko's face, while Sudo stands out in the rain, looking like he's losing a fight. Kochigawa watches the scene, unimpressed. She thinks that even if he could persuade her, the girl's reality is only going to get harsher. Sudo doesn't care about the odds. He just knows he doesn't want her to die in a state of utter despair. Kochigawa tells him his kindness has always been useless. Sudo snaps back at her, but then a sudden, massive sound cuts them off. A violent explosion rips through the transport van, catching everyone completely off guard. The vehicle is a ball of fire. Sudo screams Aiko's name, fearing the worst has happened. He sprints toward the wreckage, frantically searching through the smoke for any sign of her. Out of the debris, Aiko appears. She survived, using her monstrous arm as a shield to protect herself from the blast. Sudo is relieved to see her alive. Aiko is a mess, completely overwhelmed by the chaos. She finally breaks. Through the tears, she admits out loud that she doesn't want to die yet. They stand in the rain among the ruins. Sudo asks her one more time if she's still looking for an exit. Nearly 1 in the morning, and the subway is mostly empty. One lone passenger is just trying to make it home. The train pulls in, but instead of a normal commute, the man finds himself in the middle of a total nightmare and screams in terror. Back at the facility, Aiko is put through a grim combat trial. They've got a dog locked in a cage as her target. Kochigawa is all business, giving the signal to start the test without a second thought. The animal lunges at her, and Aiko's instinct is to just curl up and hide. She's terrified. Kochigawa watches the monitor with a cold, clinical look, searching for results rather than empathy. Aiko's arm reacts on its own, manifesting massive organic tendrils. Even Kochigawa admits the power is incredible. The session leaves Aiko drained. Kochigawa notes that the power is much weaker when she's just scared compared to fighting with will. It's now 3:20 a.m. An armored van pulls up to a station that's been cordoned off by the police. Inside the command center, the news is grim. Everyone who entered from the next station has been wiped out. Sudo is sweating, realizing they're out of options. He tells the crew to contact the lab immediately. Over at the lab, Aiko is out cold. Her vitals are steady, but she's clearly exhausted from days of non-stop stress. Kochigawa stands over her, mentioning that she hasn't been sleeping well lately. Then the emergency call comes through. Kochigawa gets the update. The situation at the subway is a disaster, and Sudo's team is in over their heads. Aiko wakes up to the news. Kochigawa tells her straight up, it's her turn to go out there. She gives Aiko an ultimatum. Either live with her monstrous hand, or stay in her misery until it kills her. Sudo's words about having a future come back to her. She realizes she can't just keep crawling on the ground. Aiko makes her choice. She tells herself she has to look forward, no matter how much it hurts. She clenches her fist, ready to fight for the organization, if that's what it takes to survive. Aiko walks toward the transport helicopter, finally ready to face what's coming. 3:55 a.m. Sudo is on site at the station, checking the status of the chimera that's been tearing through the place. The station is a slaughterhouse. Sudo looks over the carnage, telling his team to give him the camera feeds immediately. Kochigawa and Sudo talk over the comms, banking everything on Aiko's right hand and her will to win. Aiko arrives on the scene, her expression a mix of fear and grim determination. The facility staff observes her from a distance, noting that her lack of protection is actually the key to releasing her full power. Sudo watches through the monitors, looking conflicted. He reminds himself that he didn't bring her here just to use her, but because he wanted her to find a way to keep living. Aiko takes a deep breath, repeating the mission to herself. She's here to create a place for herself in this world, even if it's one built on violence. Sudo wishes her luck, though he's clearly tense. As she descends the stairs into the dark station, she can feel the weight of what she's about to do. Her old life is gone, and this cold, concrete platform is her new reality. The station is a complete mess, covered in signs of a struggle. Over the comms, Sudo warns her to stay focused and keep her ears open. Suddenly, his voice crackles with urgency. The monster is right behind her, and it's far more dangerous than anything she's faced before. Back in the command center, the tension is through the roof. Kochigawa reminds Sudo not to start giving out his own orders, as she's the one officially in charge of Aiko. Aiko stares at the carnage around her. The situation is horrific, and Sudo tells her she can't just pretend it isn't happening. She has to act. She catches a glimpse of the subway chimera, a twisted, fleshy mass that looks barely real. It's a physical manifestation of the nightmare she's living. Seeing the creature up close leaves Aiko paralyzed with fear. Her eyes go wide as she realizes just how outmatched she might be. The monster lunges, and Aiko barely manages to stumble back. She's gasping for air, the reality of the fight finally sinking in. The chimera doesn't give her a second to breathe, closing the distance instantly. Aiko's heart is racing as she looks for any way to defend herself. The creature leaps through the air, its jagged claws ready to strike. Aiko collapses to the floor, her mind screaming in terror. Over the radio, Sudo is shouting for her to get up. Aiko is completely overwhelmed, clutching her head and wishing the whole thing was just a bad dream. From the monitors, the staff can see that Aiko is at her breaking point. She's convinced she can't do this, that there's no way she can fight a monster like that. Then her left arm reacts on its own. It lashes out with incredible force, intercepting the chimera's attack and catching Aiko completely by surprise. Sudo's voice cuts through the static again. He tells her she has to fight if she ever wants to create a real home for herself. Kochigawa is just focused on the combat efficiency. Aiko's expression changes. She realizes that even if she's terrified, even if she's crying, she has to fight. It's her only path forward. She stands her ground, her monstrous arm twitching with a life of its own. It's kill or be killed, and she's finally choosing to be the one who survives. The chimera launches another assault, but this time Aiko is ready. Her arm morphs into a series of sharp, organic blades, ready to meet the monster head-on. The command center notes that this chimera is small and incredibly agile, making it a difficult target. Aiko struggles to keep up with its erratic movements. She starts tracking the monster's pattern, focusing everything she has on its next move. Her arm is primed and waiting for the perfect opening. Sudo screams for her to end it. Aiko's arm lashes out again, the organic tendrils moving with a speed that defies logic. A single, precise strike pierces through the chimera, ending the struggle instantly. The creature collapses, no longer a threat. Aiko stands over the remains, covered in blood and breathing heavily. The sheer violence of the moment leaves her shaken to the core. Sudo calls out to her through the monitor, his voice full of relief. But Aiko is staring at her monstrous arm, horrified by what it's capable of. In the command center, Sudo wants to bring her back immediately, but Kochigawa reminds him that she's the one who decides when the mission is over. Sudo isn't in the mood for games. He insists that Aiko has done enough, and that they need to retrieve her before she breaks completely. Aiko is still on the platform, hunched over and struggling to process the aftermath. The monster is dead, but the station is still a graveyard. She slowly picks herself up, looking like a ghost in the dim light. Sudo watches her with a pained expression, knowing the toll this is taking on her. Aiko stands alone on the dark platform, covered in the blood of her enemies and the victims she couldn't save. This is her new life, and she's just taken the first step into the darkness. Hosho Aiko stands amidst the carnage, her expression blank as blood drips from her clothes. Back in the control room, Kochigawa notes her strange behavior while Sudo frantically calls out to her over the comms. Without a word, Aiko lunges at a surviving chimera monster. Sudo can only watch the monitor in shock as she ignores his commands. She pummels the creature with her mutated left arm, each strike landing with bone-crushing force. The struggle is brief and brutal as she pins the beast down, finishing it off with a savage blow to the head. Aiko remains hunched over the mangled corpse, her monstrous arm still twitching as the monster's remains pool on the floor. Sudo keeps yelling into her earpiece, demanding to know what's going on, but Aiko is completely unresponsive. Slowly, the biological mass of her left hand begins to retract and shift. She stands alone in the vast, cold tunnel, the only sign of life in a place defined by death. In the control center, Sudo insists they need to stop her, but Kochigawa orders him to stand down. She's satisfied as long as the organization maintains the upper hand. Sudo snaps, accusing her of ignoring Aiko's deteriorating condition. But Kochigawa is focused on a second chimera fleeing into the deeper tunnels. Aiko doesn't wait for orders, leaping back into the darkness to hunt down the escapee. Sudo tries to charge after her, but guards hold him back. Kochigawa coldly reminds him that it's a danger zone. Sudo reflects on the cruelty of throwing a 15-year-old girl into this literal hell. He eventually breaks free, running into the darkness and screaming her name. He finds himself in a silent stretch of the tunnel, hearing nothing but the rhythmic splatter of blood hitting the floor. He freezes when he sees her silhouette, her legs trembling as she stands in the shadows. Aiko is holding the severed head of the second monster like a grisly trophy. She turns to him with a blood-smeared face and hollow eyes, leaving Sudo at a loss for words. Her body finally hits its limit, and she starts to collapse. Sudo catches her as she falls, while Kochigawa watches the feed with clinical detachment. Later, Kochigawa reviews the data, acknowledging the danger of leaving the mutated limb active. She speculates that if the mutation spreads to Aiko's entire body, it might actually make her easier for the organization to control. Sudo reports the massive death toll from the incident, noting that the tunnels are still being cleared of debris and victims. They look at the remains of the monster Aiko killed, a mangled mess that's barely recognizable. Sudo looks at the sleeping girl, hoping she can one day find a reason to smile again, despite the shove they gave her into this life. He worries that Aiko will vanish entirely, but Kochigawa wonders if the destruction will come from her own body or the invaders inside it. Kochigawa explains that Aiko is suffering from excessive adaptation syndrome, a condition where her body evolves violently to match her environment. She believes Aiko's extreme mental state is driving the physical changes. Kochigawa hands Sudo a file, telling him that she'll crumble without proper emotional support. She gives him permission to be her supervisor, admitting that the other researchers are too scared to go near her. Sudo heads down to basement level 2, where they've moved Aiko to a larger vault for stability. He uses his keycard and enters the heavy door, feeling the isolation of the room. He finds Aiko asleep, her face finally at peace in the clinical silence. In her dreams, Aiko is back in her old life, where Sachio Takashima and her parents constantly pushed her to do more. She remembers trying to be the perfect student and daughter, never wanting to disappoint anyone. She sees her loved ones praising her success, only for them to vanish into the dark, leaving her behind. She cries out in the void, begging them not to leave her alone. Aiko snaps awake in the research lab, her bandages feeling tight as the pain in her arm returns. The memories of the slaughter come rushing back, making her pulse race. The phantom smell of blood hits her like a physical weight, and she clutches her head in distress. Outside the vault, Sudo steadies himself before announcing his entrance. He opens the door to find Aiko doubled over and retching, her body finally reacting to the horrors she's committed. Hoso Aiko is completely out of it, hunched over and puking, while Sudo stands there looking helpless. He asks if she's all right, but the poor girl is way past the point of casual conversation. She can't stop retching, and when she finally looks up, her face is a mess of tears and blood. Sudo just whispers her name, clearly realizing the hell he's dragged her into. Sudo tries to comfort her, telling her not to worry, and that they even did a stomach cleanse just in case. She looks at him with those big, terrified eyes, barely holding it together. Aiko's memory is fuzzy, so she asks what happened to the monster. Sudo lies through his teeth, telling her she defeated it and that it's dead, all while looking like he's dying inside himself. She can't believe she's the one who did it, whispering, "Who? Me?" as she stares at her bandaged hand. Sudo doubles down on the praise, telling her that if she hadn't been there, they would have lost a lot more people. He's trying to make her feel like a hero instead of a weapon. He leans in close, reassuring her that she did great and that everyone is praising her. Aiko's wide-eyed reaction says she's more confused than comforted. She repeats, "Is that so?" like she's trying to convince herself it's true. Meanwhile, in a much fancier room, a glass of red wine is being poured, as if the world isn't falling apart. Director Okuda is having a casual dinner, talking about the need for a sheath to hold back their sword. He's ready to hand over full control of Aiko to someone else. Kochigawa is there too, and they share a laugh about how tough their situation is. They're discussing the girl's future over a plate of steak like they're planning a business merger. The server brings out a dish, but Kochigawa suddenly loses her appetite, telling them to take it away. Even she has limits, apparently. She looks pretty exhausted as the scene cuts back to Aiko sitting alone in her cold clinical hospital bed. The contrast between the luxury and the lab is depressing. Aiko clenches her fists, those words about everyone praising her echoing in her head. She's trying to process the trauma of the battle. She sits in the dark, clutching her hand and looking completely lost. The weight of being a monster hunter is clearly crushing her. She reflects on her situation, thinking about how, regardless of her arm, all she wants is to survive and live here. It's a sad realization of her new home. She recalls the terrifying moment in the sewers, whispering about how scared she was, even though it didn't hurt much. She was just looking for something, anything to hold on to. Outside, the media is all over the train incident. A reporter confirms 14 dead and says a suspect is being taken into custody. It's a total media circus. The suspect is being shoved into a car, screaming that it isn't him and that the attack is a sacrilege. Sudo stands by, watching the chaos with a grim expression. The news covers the terrorist incident, mentioning drug finds at the suspect's headquarters. It's all a convenient cover-up for the monster attack. Inside the facility, staff are gossiping about the rumors. They've heard about a girl who died and came back, and that she even ate a monster from the underground. People are starting to get freaked out. Two guys are lighting up, questioning why they have to rely on a monster. They're worried about what the higher-ups are thinking, and if their own people will get gobbled up. Kochigawa walks past them, telling them the final results will be out soon. One of the guys asks if they're really going to keep working with this monster girl. Their fear is pretty obvious. They wonder if she's implying they're incompetent. She just stares them down, suggesting it makes more sense to learn how to capture the monsters rather than just collecting skin samples. The guys aren't convinced, arguing that someone who only deals with dead bodies can't understand the fear of facing a live chimera. They're ready to walk away from the whole mess. They keep questioning if they can trust Aiko and if she'll just turn into something even more dangerous. They're keeping her under 24-hour surveillance just in case. Aiko is wandering the halls, looking small and fragile. Kochigawa catches up and tells her not to give the other investigators another thought. She's trying to keep the girl focused. She suggests that Aiko just stick to Sudo's guidance for now. Aiko looks like she has about 1,000,000 things on her mind, but just nods along. Aiko asks why he doesn't fear her, looking down at her bandaged arm. It's a heartbreaking moment of self-doubt. Kochigawa doesn't have a simple answer. The scene shifts to the city skyline at night, cold and indifferent. Life goes on while secret wars are being fought in the shadows. The investigation continues in a narrow alleyway. Someone reported a rotting smell, and the cops have found something truly disgusting. Everyone is covering their noses. They find a pile of mangled remains, clearly the work of a creature. One of the guys jokes about it being a legendary monster, but the fear in the room is real. It's classified as a top-secret case. They track the movement toward the sewers. It's escaped into a troublesome place, and they're calling for military backup. Things are escalating fast. One of the investigators complains about the waste of taxes for compensating the dead. He laughs about having to rely on a monster girl to clean the sewers. Talk about a lack of respect. They plan their move, hoping to catch the enemy while it's weak. Some of them see it as a chance to pay back that cold-blooded lady. They're even hoping to capture it alive. Aiko is pushing herself on a treadmill in a high-tech gym. She's breathing hard, determined to get stronger. People are still whispering about if she's safe or not. She knows everyone is using her and is afraid of her arm. but she refuses to say anything demoralizing. She's focused on the mission. Aiko thinks about becoming stronger to help everyone and defend her place. Kochigawa watches the physical test data, noting how her abilities have been enhanced by that left arm. Sudo comes back and is shocked to see the stats. She used to barely run 3 kilometers, but now she's hitting 20 without breaking a sweat. It's abnormal growth. Kochigawa mentions that Aiko was asking about him this morning. She asked why he isn't afraid of her, which clearly hits Sudo hard. She admits that of course she's afraid, her expression full of intense emotion as she looks toward the future. She's living a nightmare every day. Back on the streets, the media circus is still going. Sudo is briefed on the situation. Some guys went down 15 minutes ago and they heard a gunshot. Things are going south. Sudo looks at the map, realizing they've probably moved again. He asks Aiko, "Sound good to you?" as he prepares for the next descent into the sewers. He's all business now. Sudo and the investigation team gather in the damp, oppressive atmosphere of the sewer tunnels. Aiko stands apart from the rest, feeling the weight of the men's wary gazes as they whisper about the monster girl. Sudo keeps a tight grip on his weapon, coordinating with the team to track the creature's movements through the tunnel system. The silence is shattered when a massive chimera lunges from the dark, snatching one of the investigators, who can only scream for his life. The team is caught off guard as the creature's speed and strength completely turn the tables on their specialized unit. The monster looms over its prey, though there's a strange, almost hesitant reluctance in its movements. Watching the beast, Sudo wonders if a fragment of a human soul could possibly still exist inside such a horror. They find fresh stains on the concrete further down the tunnel, confirming the chimera's path of destruction. Aiko jumps at the sight of a simple mouse, prompting Sudo to remind her that she has much bigger things to face today. They round a corner and come face to face with the hulking, grotesque mass of the chimera monster. The lead investigator is pinned down, helpless as the monster's massive form towers over him. Aiko trembles in fear, her mind racing, while Sudo opens fire to draw the beast's attention. "Run!" Sudo yells as the chimera lets out an ear-piercing roar that echoes through the concrete chambers. The monster is an unstoppable tower of flesh and rage, forcing the team to scatter in a desperate scramble for safety. Sudo and Aiko stand their ground, Aiko's expression shifting from pure terror to a dark, cold resolve. She lunges forward, her left arm morphing into a massive, veiny claw as she clashes head-on with the creature. Sudo orders the team to use the opening Aiko created to rescue their wounded comrade. While the others focus on the rescue, a mysterious man watches Aiko's combat performance with calculating interest. Sudo tells Aiko to pull back, but she doesn't move, her transformed arm pulsing with a dangerous, monstrous energy. Aiko delivers a crushing blow, only to realize with a shock that the monster is surprisingly weak. She stops her assault, sensing that the creature has completely lost its will to fight. "It'll be easy to defeat you," she whispers, but Sudo shouts for her to stop before she can strike again. The chimera looks up at her with eyes that seem almost pleading, and Aiko is frozen by the realization of their shared nature. The battle ends, leaving Aiko standing alone in the shadows, staring at her monstrous arm in utter horror. "Isn't it more like me?" she cries, the reality of her own transformation breaking her spirit once again. The investigators begin the grim process of cleaning up the scene and recovering their equipment. The dead monster remains pinned to the wall, a grotesque trophy of the night's violence. Sudo watches Aiko as she stares at her bloodied hands, her mind spiraling into a dark place. He tries to comfort her with cold logic, reminding her that these things took everything from both of them. Covered in blood and wearing her Atheos jacket, Aiko vows to hunt down every last one of the monsters for her vengeance. The mission is over, but the war is far from won, leaving a heavy silence in the wake of the carnage. Outside the facility, the night is quiet, except for the sound of a discarded cigarette being crushed underfoot. Somewhere else, a security monitor plays back footage of the secret organization's every move. A mysterious man watches the recording, a predatory grin spreading across his face as he focuses on Sudo. The city is a gray landscape of rain and concrete, hiding the deep wounds of the night's conflict. Aiko runs blindly through the downpour, trying to escape the haunting image of the dying creature. Later, as Sudo drives her back, he breaks the silence to tell her she did a good job. He hands her a towel to dry off, but Aiko only wonders if his kindness is reserved for the weapon she's become. Days later, the rainy season drags on, casting a somber mood over the local hospital. Aiko stares at her reflection in the window, questioning if there's anything human left inside her anymore. Sudo slips into a hospital room to visit his ailing mother, trying to put on a brave face. He tries to joke with her, but seeing her health decline further is a pain he can't easily hide. Sudo visits his mother in the hospital, putting on a brave face while they talk about her upcoming surgery and the expensive medical bills. She reaches out to touch his head, affectionately warning him to be careful with his work and not to get himself killed. Sudo adjusts his tie, looking a bit somber as he tells her he has to head out since it's getting late. As he leaves, he realizes that while Atheos's care has kept her alive for 5 years longer than expected, it also feels like they're holding her hostage to keep him in line. Later, Sudo confronts Kochigawa in a hallway, demanding that she finally give him some straight answers about what's going on. Kochigawa is as clinical as ever, explaining that Aiko's condition is irreversible. The monster cells are spreading to her heart, making amputation a death sentence. She's completely heartless about it, arguing that if Aiko can find a purpose as a weapon for Atheos, then the ethics don't really matter. Aiko's fragile state hangs over them, a reminder that despite her power, she's still just a girl trying to find a reason to keep living. Sudo is haunted by the thought of what Aiko's future looks like, fearing she's being groomed for something even more monstrous. He wakes up in a cold sweat, gasping as the nightmares of horrific transformations and labs continue to torment him. Back at his desk, Sudo looks through a confidential file that contains a photo of himself as a 13-year-old boy named Hiromi. He's visibly shaken, staring at the old ID card and wondering why the organization has been keeping tabs on him for so long. Night falls over the city, and the massive bridges stand out against a backdrop of clouds and secrets. Sudo waits on a bench until he hears footsteps. A mysterious figure approaches, impressed that he actually decided to show up alone. The man, Yujiro Sera, tells him to stay cool and listen as he prepares to dump some high-level info on him. Sera starts a story about a Japanese pharmaceutical company that was deep into human chromosome research over a decade ago. He explains that their main lab blew up under suspicious circumstances, and while the media called it an accident, it was clearly a massive cover-up. Sudo asks what he's getting at, and Sera reaches into his coat, telling him to take a look at what was recovered from the site. Sudo pulls a photo from the envelope, and his expression immediately turns to one of pure shock. It's a picture of a girl with long blonde hair suspended in a stasis tank, a chilling piece of evidence labeled as part of a secret scheme. Driven by what he saw, Sudo sneaks into a secure lab later that night, questioning everything he thought he knew about the organization. He starts digging through the digital archives, but he's interrupted by the sound of someone else in the dark room. It's Kochigawa. Sudo quickly covers by saying he just wanted to check on Aiko's profile, but she doesn't seem convinced. He asks her about a hidden facility in the mountains, but she shuts him down, telling him to forget he ever asked, before walking away. Kochigawa warns Sudo that digging deeper into the organization's secrets will only lead to trouble. She makes it clear she won't always be there to save him. Sudo accepts the warning with a heavy heart, telling her to take good care of Hoso Aiko before he leaves. Back in her room, Aiko stares at her human hand, the silence of the facility pressing in on her. She looks at her bandaged left arm. To her, it's not a part of her body. It's just a weapon built to kill monsters for the organization. Kochigawa brings in a tray of food and some pills, telling Aiko she needs to take one before bed to help her sleep. Aiko takes the medicine, but her thoughts are elsewhere. She asks about Sudo, and the researcher notes how much he seems to care. After telling Aiko to get some rest, Kochigawa leaves. The girl is left alone with her thoughts. Outside, the rain starts to fall heavily as Sudo drives away, his mind stuck on a problem he can't seem to solve. He looks at a photo of a young blonde girl, someone who used to be very special to him. The memory takes him back 14 years, to a rainy day when his life was still normal. Back then, Sudo was just a schoolboy living under the shadow of his strict, unrelenting father. His mother tried to keep the peace, and he did his best to be the obedient son his father demanded. One rainy afternoon, he noticed someone lurking near the back of the house. Driven by a curiosity he'd later regret, he decided to check it out himself before calling for help. He grabbed an umbrella and headed outside, his eyes fixed on the shadows beneath the eaves. There, tucked away in the darkness, he found a girl. He was shocked, but she looked even more terrified. The girl was drenched and shivering. She was about his age, with long, pale hair and wide, frightened eyes. Sudo realized she was a runaway, and he couldn't just leave her out there in the cold. He offered to let her come inside, but she immediately refused, terrified that the adults would catch her. She was certain that if she was found, they'd drag her right back to wherever she'd escaped from. The girl, Nana, begged him to let her hide there for just one night, promising to be gone by dawn. Seeing how desperate she was, Sudo decided right then that he was going to protect her. At the time, he had no idea that this single decision would change his destiny forever. 3 days passed, and he kept her hidden in the shed, sneaking out to bring her food whenever he could. Nana was always thrilled to see him, often forgetting to stay hidden in her excitement. She was surprisingly cheerful for someone in her position, and he found himself drawn to her energy. They talked about everything. Nana mentioned she'd seen his mother in the garden, which had given her a real scare. Sudo warned her that she couldn't stay in the shed forever. It was only a matter of time before his parents found out. Nana watched the birds outside, telling him she wished she could be just like them, free to fly away. She didn't remember where she came from or why people were after her. She only knew her name was Nana. She laughed about flying into the sky, and Sudo couldn't help but smile at her optimism. Then her tone shifted. She told him she had a secret and offered to show him her wings. Sudo watched, confused, as she began to peel back her dress to reveal her back. Nana claimed the people who held her told her these would eventually grow into a marvelous pair of wings. But when she turned around, Sudo didn't see wings. He saw horrific scars that looked like they'd been burned into her skin. The sight of her mangled back broke his heart. He pulled her into a tight hug and promised he'd never let anything happen to her. Nana smiled, finally feeling safe in his arms. But the peace didn't last long. Soon after, the sound of heavy footsteps approached the house. Sudo and Nana froze as they realized someone was searching the property. A group of men in suits showed his mother a photo, asking for permission to search the yard for the missing girl. One of the men headed straight for the back, his expression cold and professional. He slid open the shed door, and Sudo realized their secret was out. The agents close in, their leader realizing that Nana is hiding just a short distance away. One of the men shouts that he's found her. Panicked, Sudo grabs Nana and tells her they have to hurry. They make a break for it, but the agents are right on their heels, calling out for Nana by her experimental designation. Sudo pedals his bicycle with every ounce of strength he has, desperate to get them somewhere far away from their pursuers. It starts to pour as Sudo looks back, checking if they're still being followed. He tries to reassure the terrified girl, telling her that everything is going to be okay now. They take shelter under a bridge, where Sudo asks Nana if she's feeling pain or discomfort anywhere. Nana clutches her body, crying out in pain. Sudo suggests a hospital, but the mere mention of it makes her recoil in fear. Through her tears, Nana begs not to be sent back to that place. She just wants to stay with Sudo. Sudo's heart sinks as the agents finally catch up, ordering him to step away from the girl immediately. The lead agent points his gun, claiming Nana is a danger that must be taken into custody. Sudo stands his ground, shouting back that there's nothing dangerous about her, and refusing to move. Nana lets out a blood-curdling scream. The agent realizes the situation is spiraling out of control. The transformation has begun. Sudo watches in absolute horror as Nana's body begins to distort, flesh tearing and shifting into something unrecognizable. A massive, grotesque structure of flesh and bone erupts from Nana's back. This isn't the wings she dreamed of. It's a nightmare. The transformation is agony. Nana is losing herself to the monster growing out of her. Pseudo screams for them to stop and not shoot her, even as the agent tells him to get out of the way. One of Nana's new, monstrous limbs lashes out with incredible force. The limb strikes the agent, sending blood splattering across the pavement. Pseudo is frozen, unable to process the violence unfolding right in front of him. The thing that was once Nana shivers and moans, its human half barely visible through the biological mess. Through the distortion, Nana begs Pseudo to save her, but he can no longer see the girl he knew in this creature. A discarded gun lies on the ground nearby, but Pseudo is too paralyzed by terror to move. The sound of more agents opening fire fills the air. Pseudo lets out a cry of despair. The bullets tear through the air as the agents show no mercy to the transformed girl. As she's struck, Nana manages one final, whispered, "Thank you," to the boy who tried to help her. Nana lies still, her suffering finally over. Pseudo collapses nearby, blood on his face and his world shattered. Everything goes black as Pseudo loses consciousness on the cold ground. He wakes up later in a hospital bed with a bandage wrapped around his head. When he asks about Nana, one of the agents coldly informs him that she is already dead. Overcome with guilt, Pseudo cries, mourning the fact that he failed to protect the girl he cared for. That tragedy is the reason he eventually joined Atheos, hoping to find a way to atone for what happened. In the present day, Pseudo looks at Hosho Aiko, seeing a shadow of Nana in her, and hoping he can save her this time. His car pulls up to a gated facility in the pouring rain. The photo of Nana is still in his hand. He stands outside the fence of a hospital that the organization has been keeping secret. Inside, the facility is dim and eerie, with tattered curtains and a sense of abandonment. Pseudo's expression is grim and determined. He's prepared for whatever truth is hidden within these walls. He reflects on how his life changed completely the day he lost Nana. He remembers his old life, his family, and the normal future he once expected. Aiko sits in her own cell, staring at her monstrous arm, a constant reminder of what she's become. Pseudo stands before the fence, the rain drenching his suit as he stares up at the building. His boots crunch on shards of broken glass as he begins to walk through the dark, empty hallways. Pseudo explores the eerie, abandoned hallway, noting the complete lack of any security personnel. He clutches a map and a worn photo of Nana, determined to find whatever secrets Atheos went to such lengths to hide. He rounds a corner and finds that he was wrong about the security. There's a guarded zone ahead. A guard stops him, but Pseudo quickly improvises, claiming he's just there on an errand from the main building. The guard isn't convinced. Pseudo drops the act and draws his weapon, demanding to know what's beyond the door. The guard is terrified. Pseudo knocks him out, apologizing as the man collapses to the floor. He grabs the guard's weapon and armband, telling him it's time for an early break. Pseudo uses the stolen keycard to bypass the electronic lock, the heavy door sliding open with a mechanical hum. He finds himself in a dim, barred-off area that feels more like a prison than a hospital. The room is a chaotic mess of medical equipment, IV bags, and an experimental pod sitting in the center. Pseudo hears Nana's voice in his head, a hallucination of her begging not to be sent back to that place. He shakes it off, calling himself stupid. He knows Nana died 14 years ago. He's chasing a ghost. He remembers that day vividly, convinced that he had killed her with his own hands to end her pain. In a flashback, an agent tells a sobbing young Pseudo that he released her from her suffering and should not be ashamed. Back in the present, Pseudo is done being ashamed. He knows he has every right to the truth about Nana. With a look of cold determination, Pseudo heads toward the heart of the restricted facility. He enters a massive laboratory filled with specialized containment tanks and humming machinery. Elsewhere, Kochigawa realizes Pseudo has turned off his phone, which is strictly against protocol. She pulls up a file on her computer for an unlisted facility that even she doesn't have clearance for. She confirms with her team that Sudo was definitely spotted heading toward that forbidden location. At the hospital, Aiko is in bed. Kochigawa asks if she's ready for what's coming next. Sudo hacks the facility's terminal, his eyes widening as the screen displays data on cells of the Chimera. He finds a large, sealed vessel and wrenches the manual release handle with everything he has. The vessel opens with a hiss of steam, and Sudo is left speechless by the horrific sight within. It's Nana. She's hooked up to a web of tubes and wires, her body fused with strange biological technology. Sudo is in total shock. Nana's body? He stammers, unable to comprehend how she could be alive. The creature in the tank is a nightmare. Its skin is translucent, and its face is partially mutated. Sudo collapses to the floor, his world crumbling as he realizes the life he's lived for 14 years was based on a lie. He stares at her, wondering if he's trapped in some kind of twisted dream or reality. He remembers the agent telling him she was dead. They lied to him so they could keep her as a living experiment. He sees a familiar mark on her chest. It's the bullet hole from the shot he thought had ended her life. Nana was never dead. Atheos kept her in this hole, experimenting on her for over a decade. Tears fall from Sudo's eyes as the magnitude of her suffering hits him. He's sorry he couldn't find her sooner. He asks her if she still knows who he is, his voice breaking as he looks at the wreckage of the girl he knew. Nana's vacant eyes seem to focus. Through the fog of agony, she recognizes the man standing before her. A ghostly smile appears on her face as she whispers his childhood name, Hiromi. The scene shifts as a helicopter lands in the pouring rain at a different facility. Kochigawa leads Aiko out of the transport, telling her to hurry up as the rotors blast them with wind. Aiko asks if there's really a chimera monster here, but Kochigawa is focused and cold. Aiko notes that the atmosphere feels different. Sudo isn't there, and she realizes she has to fight alone today. Kochigawa slides open the door to the target area, warning Aiko that she'll die if she doesn't stay sharp. Inside, a massive, grotesque chimera monster awaits, its fleshy limbs twitching as it senses their presence. Aiko rushes into the hidden laboratory, her heart sinking as she sees the carnage and frantically searches for Sudo. She finds him, but he's pinned against the wall by a massive, grotesque monster. Aiko is frozen in shock at the sight. Kochigawa commands Aiko to kill the chimera monster immediately, uncaring that Sudo is right in the line of fire. Aiko looks at the monster and realizes it has a human face. She can see the tragedy of Nana's existence in its weeping eyes. Aiko hesitates, her hand shaking. If she uses her monstrous arm now, she's certain she'll end up killing Sudo too. Sudo screams her name, but it sounds more like a plea for her to end his suffering than a call for help. The monster looks at Sudo and whispers his childhood name, Hiromi, with a voice that sounds like a fading ghost. The creature lashes out with a fleshy limb, and Sudo is thrown across the room as the beast screams in agony. Sudo tells Aiko to forget about him. He begs her to just kill him along with Nana and end it all right here. Aiko is horrified. She can't believe that the man who saved her life would ask her to take his in such a miserable place. Sudo confesses his deepest sin. 14 years ago, he didn't shoot Nana to save her. He did it because he was scared and wanted to live. He spent over a decade lying to himself, pretending he was a hero, while Nana was kept in a hole and experimented on for years. He looks at Aiko, the weight of his guilt finally stripping away his mask. He's realized the ugly truth of his own heart. He admits that he sacrificed the girl he loved just so he could keep breathing. And he can't live with that realization anymore. Aiko feels his despair, but she refuses to let him give up. She knows the pain of being powerless all too well. With a roar of defiance, Aiko jumps toward the monster, her transformed arm glowing with a terrifying energy. She screams at him, asking if he's really going to run away from life. She won't let him die like a coward. Aiko throws herself into the battle, her clawed hand ready to deliver a killing blow to the creature that was once Nana. She grabs the monster's head, her strength far exceeding its own. She tells Pseudo to hurry and get away while he still can. The monster shrieks and struggles, but Aiko is a relentless force of nature. She's determined to save Pseudo at any cost. With a massive burst of power, Aiko crushes the monster's fleshy form, the laboratory being torn apart by the impact. She roars that she has to live, and so does he. She rejects the idea that their fate is only to be discarded by this world. Pseudo watches her in awe. Seeing her fight so hard for his survival makes him realize that maybe life does have meaning after all. The creature is finally still. Kochigawa stands in the distance, watching coldly as Aiko and Pseudo are left alone in the ruins of the lab. Pseudo yells for Aiko to stop, warning her that what she's about to do will change everything. But Aiko is past the point of listening, her scream echoing through the sewer as she lunges forward. A sickening crunch of flesh and bone marks the end of the struggle. Nana's monstrous form collapses, blood pooling quickly on the cold concrete floor. Pseudo can barely breathe, coughing as he looks up and asks Aiko if she's all right. Aiko looks at him with hollow eyes, saying she only did it because he told her she needed to live. She breaks down, admitting that if he's not there, she'll be completely alone in this world again. Pseudo watches her, his expression softening as he tells her to never say she doesn't care about her own life. He buries his face in his hand, the weight of his own lies and failures finally catching up to him. Kneeling on the dirty floor, Pseudo realizes he was terrified of facing the truth and was ready to run away one more time. The rest of the team moves in to clean up the horrific remains of the failed experiment. Kochigawa immediately gets on the phone to arrange transport, while Pseudo stays by the body. In his mind, he sees Nana as she once was, a girl who just wanted to be free like a bird. The memories of her suffering and her broken dreams flood back, leaving him with nothing but a whispered apology. Pseudo stands up, wiping the grime from his face with a new sense of grim purpose. He tells Aiko they're leaving, crushing his regrets because there's still work that needs to be done. Aiko follows him silently as they walk away from the carnage, leaving the lab behind. All that's left is a twisted shell on the floor, a reminder of the human cost of their research. Back at the facility, Aiko frantically scrubs her monstrous arm in the shower, trying to wash away the blood. She stands under the water, questioning everything the organization told her about their enemies. She remembers Pseudo saying he fights to save people, and the contradiction begins to tear at her. Kochigawa interrupts her thoughts, telling her that her time is up and she needs to get out. Aiko dries herself off, trying to convince herself that following orders is the only way she won't be alone. Meanwhile, at a high-end office, Director Okuda is being grilled for letting information leak. The representative tries to keep things calm, but the tension in the room is at a breaking point. The chairman slams his hand down, furious that they lost such vital research material. He wants Aiko transferred to his personal center, but Okuda argues they can't hunt the others without her. The chairman eventually backs down, making the recovery of the escaped chimera their absolute priority. Later, the representative is picked up by a car where Kochigawa is waiting to debrief him. He's not worried about Pseudo's recent behavior. He's convinced the investigator is still useful to them. To him, Aiko isn't a girl. She's just the organization's most valuable trump card. Pseudo is already waiting for him in the records room, looking like he hasn't slept in days. The representative asks why he's making such a mess, and Pseudo just holds up an item he supposedly forgot. He stares at his official armband for a second, before hurling it across the room in disgust. He confronts the representative directly, accusing him of lying about everything that happened to Nana. Pseudo yells that they told him she was dead years ago, but the representative doesn't even flinch. He gives a cold, technical explanation about her heart stopping, acting like her suffering was just a footnote. For his insubordination, Pseudo is stripped of his duties and placed under house arrest. The representative gets right in his personal space, banning him from the lab until further notice. He drops a final warning, telling Pseudo that the organization is far more dangerous than he can imagine. He demands a written apology before dismissing him, leaving Pseudo to stew in his anger. Pseudo stomps his foot on the ground, the memory of Nana's fate fueling a new, dangerous resolve. Sudo stares at his reflection, resolving to blow the whistle on the organization's secrets, no matter the cost. He waits at the station, feeling like the brass is ghosting him while they hunt for an informant he can't even get a hold of. Walking down a side street, he catches a couple of guys following him and realizes his luck just ran out. He barely has time to blink before someone hits him with a face full of knockout spray. He tries to bolt, but the chemicals are already doing their job, turning his legs to lead. The goons quickly pin him down, radioing headquarters that they've got the target secured. He manages to limp past an old neighbor, lying through his teeth that he's just headed to the hospital for a checkup. Back at the Atheos facility, the sterile hum of equipment keeps a cold watch over their latest subjects. Aiko is back in the scanner, frustrated that she's treated like a piece of equipment and never told a single detail about her own health. The routine is cut short when a tech screams about a Code 8 disaster breaking out at a civilian facility nearby. An executive loses his mind on the monitors, demanding they deploy the Chimera Girl before the whole thing goes public. Kochigawa is visibly stressed as the orders come in. They're being sent straight into the middle of the mess. The hospital is a war zone. Doctors are screaming to barricade the floors and leave the patients in the upper wards to their fate. Aiko arrives at the chaotic scene, watching terrified survivors being herded away by armed security. She asks if Sudo is coming to help, but Kochigawa brushes her off, saying they have to move right now. They lead her to a set of heavy fire doors, making it clear that every life in there is now her responsibility. Aiko steadies her bandaged hand, whispering to herself that she's going to stop this before anyone else gets hurt. But when the doors finally open, the sight on the other side completely shatters her resolve. She finds a man standing in the wreckage, his body twisting and groaning as it begins to warp into a monster. He screams in absolute agony, begging for his sanity as the transformation shreds what's left of his humanity. Aiko is paralyzed by the horror of it, while the guards start yelling at her to snap out of it and do her job. Sudo shouts at Aiko to finish the job, demanding she kill the creature before there are any more victims. But Aiko can only watch in horror as the man on the ground begs for his life, his body already beginning to fail him. Sudo coldly confirms that the man is indeed a chimera, even as Aiko watches him painfully rip apart from the inside. In an instant, the last traces of humanity vanish, replaced by the grotesque and unrecognizable form of a monster. The sight shatters Aiko's composure, her eyes wide with a realization she can't look away from. She stares at her own clawed hand, the physical evidence that she's no different from the thing she was just told to kill. When Sudo tells her to hurry up, Aiko can't even find the strength to stand, completely paralyzed by her own fear. A single horrific question begins to loop in her mind. How many people has she already murdered in the name of safety? She tries to tell herself she was just following orders. But when the team moves to clear out the area, she finally snaps and refuses to move. Crying on the floor, she finally admits to herself that she knew the truth all along. She just didn't want to acknowledge it. Her monstrous arm lashes out uncontrollably, reacting to her internal chaos as she continues to spiral. A violent spray of fluid covers the area, punctuated by Aiko's desperate screams that she can't do this anymore. Aiko's face is a mask of tears and blood as she begs for the fighting to stop, her voice cracking under the strain. She screams at the top of her lungs that she isn't a monster, her world falling apart in real time. She throws herself at the locked door, banging her fists against it and begging to be let out of this nightmare. Exhausted and broken, she slumps against the wall, her voice reduced to a whisper as she cries out for Sudo to save her. Aiko's eyes are wide and vacant, staring into a void of her own making while her mind retreats from the trauma. The room is silent now, leaving Aiko alone with the grotesque remains of the person she was forced to destroy. She can't stop thinking about how no one told her the truth about the chimera, and the weight of her victims feels like it's crushing her. She vows that she won't be a part of this anymore, even as the blood continues to splatter around her. From behind the observation glass, Kochigawa and her team watch Aiko's collapse, noting that she's finally lost the will to fight. The chimera monster lashes out with a heavy blow, sending Hoso Aiko flying across the room. Aiko hits the floor hard, her body aching and her mind spinning as she hears the command to retreat. Kochigawa watches through the monitors, realizing she can't let her primary subject be destroyed just yet. Agent Takeda is given on-site command, instructed to use military force to eliminate the target if Aiko fails. He prepares to order the troops in, knowing that Aiko's life only matters as long as she remains a viable weapon. Aiko stares at the monster, her breath hitching as she realizes it isn't just mindlessly attacking, it's suffering. The creature's distorted voice rasps out a plea for death, a sound so human it makes Aiko's heart sink. She trembles, tears streaming down her face as she asks why she is the one who has to be a murderer. Apologizing to the man inside the beast, she curls into a ball, her spirit completely broken by the cruelty of her task. The chimera lunges again, forcing Aiko to scream in desperation, questioning the very point of her existence. A massive impact slams into the ground where she stood, throwing dust and debris into the air. Someone shouts her name as she's tossed around like a rag doll, her world becoming a blur of pain and shadow. Slumped against the wall, Aiko wonders if it would be easier to just let go and let the pain finally stop. She stares at the monster, her eyes wide as she feels a sudden, violent surge of power from within. In a frantic explosion of gore, Aiko's monstrous arm acts on its own, tearing the chimera apart in a single, brutal motion. Kochigawa is stunned by the sudden turn of events, watching as the monitor is obscured by the splatter of biological remains. Aiko sits in the middle of the carnage, her breathing ragged as the shadow of her arm looms over the mess. She looks down at herself, feeling the terrifying extent of the transformation that just took place. The memory of the kill is vivid. The heat of the blood, and the sickening sound of bone and meat being pulverized by her fist. Aiko is left trembling, her skin coated in the warm fluid of the creature that was once a person. Blood drips from the ceiling and pools around her, a grim testament to the violence she's capable of. She stares blankly at the mangled heap on the floor, her mind unable to fully process the horror she's just committed. Close up on her eye, Aiko's pupil dilates as she whispers a soft, broken denial of what she has become. Someone shouts for the violence to stop, the sound cutting through the ringing in Aiko's ears. The sound of heavy machinery and the whir of equipment fill the air as the cleanup crew prepares to move in. Agent Takeda steps into the room, his expression tightening as he sees the sheer amount of blood covering every surface. He reports the elimination of the target over his radio, confirming that Aiko Hosho has successfully destroyed the chimera. Aiko is a ghostly figure in the center of the room, her silhouette dark against the white walls now stained with red. Miles away, Sudo watches a news report about the hospital incident, his face grim as the media is kept at a distance by the military. Sudo wakes up in an unfamiliar room, surrounded by piles of electronic equipment and books, wondering how he got there. Fragments of his memory return, being intercepted by a van and a sudden blackout as he was dragged away. He is greeted by a cheerful young man with spiky hair and a blonde woman with a camera, both acting as if his kidnapping was no big deal. Sudo recognizes a voice from his past, his heart jumping as he looks toward the man entering the room. The man is Yujiro Sera, a lean, tanned journalist with messy chin-length hair and sunglasses, the very person who gave Sudo the information about Nana. Sera smirks, casually mentioning that kidnapping was the easiest way to have a conversation while Sudo was being tailed. He offers a half-hearted apology for the rough treatment, then jokes about brainwashing Sudo before letting him go. Sera explains that the two young people in the room are his roommates, both of whom have had their own traumatic encounters with chimeras. Sudo is suspicious, questioning how a supposedly private citizen could possibly know so much top-secret information. He demands answers about the secret facility and what happened to Nana, refusing to be kept in the dark any longer. Sera begins his explanation by revealing a mysterious explosion that occurred at a research facility 40 years ago, the true starting point of the current crisis. He details how massive amounts of funding were poured into genetic manipulation experiments, sacrificing countless test subjects in the pursuit of results. The goal was the creation of an omnipotent antibody that could cure any disease and significantly enhance human physical and mental performance. But the project failed spectacularly. The subjects' bodies rejected the antibody, causing horrific physical mutations and violent insanity, birthing the monsters they now call chimeras. Yujiro Sera finishes the history lesson, explaining that Atheos was formed by the government specifically to recover the escaped test subjects and bury the evidence. To the public, these monsters don't exist. Pseudo is sickened, finally understanding the true nature of the breeding improvements he's been hearing about. He thinks of Nana and the cruelty she endured for the sake of science. The weight of the truth hits him like a physical blow, his eyes wide with the realization that he's been working for the very monsters he thought he was fighting. Sarah shows him a folder detailing the secret plans of the organization's executive board. Their goal isn't just recovery, it's refinement. They want to turn the chimeras into the ultimate, controllable weapons. Pseudo slams his hand onto the table, his frustration boiling over. He realizes his entire career has just been a glorified role as an experimental materials procurement specialist. He stares at Sarah, his face drenched in sweat as he tries to process the sheer scale of the conspiracy. Sarah just takes another drag of his cigarette, completely unfazed. Sarah leans in, telling Pseudo that if they're going to act, it has to be now, before the breeding experiments reach perfection. Pseudo can barely wrap his head around the idea of taking down such a massive organization. Pseudo asks why a journalist would be this committed to a suicide mission. Sarah's expression darkens as he admits that Atheos stole something irreplaceable from him. Sarah pulls out a photo of a girl and asks Pseudo if he recognizes her. It's a face Pseudo knows all too well. Pseudo identifies her as Hosho Aiko, confused as to how a girl reported dead 2 months ago is still part of this nightmare. Sarah confirms his suspicions. A folder on the table outlines Aiko's precarious situation. If she doesn't prove her worth as a weapon, she'll be handed over to the National Research Center for even more invasive testing. Pseudo clenches his teeth, his resolve hardening. He can't allow Aiko to suffer the same fate as Nana. He has to get her out of there. Back at the lab, Director Okuda, a stocky man in a patterned suit, makes a rare appearance as he walks through the corridors of the facility. Kochigawa reports on Aiko's status, suggesting she may no longer be reliable as a biological asset. Director Okuda cuts her off, insisting that the final decision on her fate is his alone. In her dimly lit cell, Aiko stares blankly at the wall. Her spirit drained after the recent combat and the trauma of her transformation. Bandaged and broken, Aiko sits slumped on the floor as a curtain flutters in the draft. To the organization, she isn't a person, just a subject that still needs to evolve. Inside the cold walls of Atheos, the executive board is reeling over the loss of their ideal resource, number 7. To make matters worse, chimeras are popping up everywhere, and it's only a matter of time before the public catches on. They've been trying to study the creatures Hoshu Aiko killed, but the samples taken from the Aiko girl are practically useless. Despite the lack of data, Director Okuda is obsessed with making her the centerpiece of their research. Outside, the media is reporting on the terrorist attacks, though rumors of a massive disinformation campaign are already starting to leak. In the middle of the chaos, a man in a suit takes a call, asking if Pseudo has been tracked down yet. He demands that Pseudo's disappearance be kept under wraps, reminding whoever's on the other end that it's their job to bring him back. Back at the facility, Hosho Aiko remains in a catatonic state, her medical records painting a grim picture of the damage she's sustained. She stares into nothingness, her mind locked away from the world. Suddenly, a visceral crunch echoes in her head, shattering the silence. Her nightmare begins with a horrific vision of a monster devouring someone right in front of her eyes. Aiko screams for it to stop as the nightmare version of herself is grabbed by the same beast. Whispers of murderer fill the air, accusing her of the bloodshed she's caused. She begs for forgiveness, but the dark silhouettes of her victims continue to crowd her. In a vision of a simpler time, she recalls only wanting a place where she actually belonged. But a voice tells her she's only valuable if she keeps fighting and killing the chimeras. Through tears, she rejects the idea of becoming a tool meant only for slaughter. She feels her own heart dying a little more every time she's forced to take a life. Her younger self confronts her, calling her a liar for trying to run away from the truth. She is forced to look back at the last place she supposedly belonged. She sees memories of the family she was promised. A lie told just to keep her compliant. A lonely younger Aiko stands in a dark hallway, a stark contrast to the girl she was supposed to be. The woman who was supposed to be her mother admits she isn't confident she can ever truly love her. Every time Aiko calls her mama, the woman feels like she's part of a cruel trick. Aiko breaks down, wondering why she's being forced to relive these painful memories now. Faces from her past surround her, demanding that she just be a good girl and follow orders. She faces her younger self again, pleading for the memories to stop. Curled in a ball on the floor, she realizes she has nowhere left to go. Her silent plea for someone to help her goes unanswered in the void. Back in reality, Kochigawa notes that Aiko's body is healing fast, but her mind has retreated into a fugue state. Director Okuda enters the room and tells her to wake up, acting as if she's just catching a cold. He introduces himself with a polite smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Without warning, he reaches out and smacks her across the face. Kochigawa is horrified, yelling at the director to stop. He calmly explains that pain is just proof that she's still alive. He smirks, completely unbothered by the girl's suffering. Okuda tells Kochigawa he has an idea to snap her out of it, even without Sudo around. To him, she isn't a person. She's just a legacy left behind for him to refine. He claims that she is still in the middle of a grand evolution. Kochigawa looks at a group photo, questioning the identity of the people shown in the files. A flashback reveals the cold, clinical nature of the past, with Nana being sent to an examination bed. Looking at the old photos, Aiko realizes she knows this girl and the others who were lost to the facility. In a clinical haze, Aiko experiences a disjointed memory of the lab, where a scientist tells her she's going to sleep just a little longer. As she lies helpless in the facility, the world outside demands justice, but the people who hurt her are still hiding in the shadows. Sudo meets with Yujiro Sera, discussing the urgent need to expose Atheos's inhuman conduct and reform the organization from its foundations. Sera admits he has crossed many dangerous lines over the years to gather evidence, discovering hidden facilities that belong solely to the executive board. The conversation turns to Aiko's specific research, with Sera suspecting something far more sinister is at the core of the breeding experiments. Sudo is fully committed to a rescue mission, realizing that if Atheos disappears, Aiko will lose the only place she has left. Despite her freakish arm, Sudo sees her as just an innocent girl who needs protection, regardless of the risks involved. Sera points out that even if they bust her out, her life will never be normal as long as she's attached to that weapon. As Sudo contemplates how society will treat her, Hiromi pipes up, suggesting that Aiko would probably just love to have a friend. Hiromi flashes a bright smile, encouraging Sudo to hurry up and spring her so she can laugh like a normal girl. Sudo looks determined, hoping that someday Aiko will be able to smile again and find a true sense of belonging. The scene shifts back to the sterile walls of the facility, a massive, imposing fortress keeping its dark secrets hidden. In a chaotic flash, people are running for their lives as the weight of the past begins to catch up with them. Heavy breathing fills the silence as a mother figure is shown holding a child, a memory of a life that was taken too soon. Aiko gasps for air, her mind struggling to process the fragments of a past she barely understands. She recalls a fleeting moment of peace, a gentle smile from someone she once held dear. Her eyes snap open, the rhythmic thump, thump of her heart echoing through the medical room. Kochigawa monitors her brainwaves, noting that she is trapped in a dream state even more active than when she's awake. Director Okuda arrives, revealing a shocking truth. Aiko is a blood relation of one of the former test subjects from the previous generation. He instructs an assistant to dig up everything they can on Aiko's birth, sensing that her history is the key to solving their research mysteries. The records show a tragic past. Aiko was an orphan raised until age 3 before being adopted, but her delivery to the orphanage was preceded by a dark event. An infant was found crying next to a woman thought to be her mother, who had been murdered by strangulation, with no records of their existence. Kochigawa looks at the catatonic girl, feeling a wave of pity for the poor child, born with such a bitter destiny. Aiko lies restrained on the bed, her mind drifting through the void as she wonders why people always try to change one another. The heavy sound of footsteps echoes down a hospital hallway as someone approaches a private room. A man stands at the bedside of an elderly woman, a quiet moment of duty amidst a life of chaos. Outside, Sudo and Hiromi finalize their plans, knowing that if they're caught, Atheos will snuff them out without a second thought. Sudo looks at his companion, his face shadowed with the weight of the suicide mission they're about to undertake. The elderly woman tells the young man not to worry about her, encouraging him to finally start doing what he truly wants to do. He gives her a final, somber look before turning away to face the coming storm. A door clicks shut, leaving a hospital room in silence as the night deepens over the city. A phone rings in an office, an incoming call from a payphone that catches the attention of a man at his desk. He answers, startled to hear Sudo's voice on the other end, asking for a favor from Chief Usui. In a rain-slicked phone booth, Sudo makes his plea, his voice urgent and desperate. Back at the facility, Aiko remains a prisoner of her own body, oblivious to the rescue being set in motion. Gurneys rattle through the halls as the facility prepares for a new phase of the Goddess Project. Director Okuda dismisses the threat of the media and the executive board, viewing them as nothing more than trivial problems. He gloats over his creation, anticipating the birth of a goddess who will rule over a new human race. Hiromi is busy at a computer, successfully hooking up a camera to the Metro Police Department. The pressure is building as the media gathers for a press conference that could blow Atheos' cover-up wide open. Sudo prepares for the infiltration, knowing they're essentially walking onto a battlefield. He puts on his jacket and checks his gear, ready to risk everything for the girl in the tower. A nostalgic flashback shows a young Yujiro Sera, known then as Yu-chan, and a woman named Yuriko, sharing a warm, peaceful moment in a simpler time. In the present, Sera and Hiromi prepare to depart, leaving their safe house behind as the mission to save Aiko begins in earnest. Sera lights a cigarette, reflecting on the grim reality that he might not return, but he finds comfort in knowing Hiromi and the others will survive. Gazing at the photo of his past, Sera wonders if there's a place in this chaotic world where a man like him truly belongs. Aiko's mind drifts into a fragmented dream, where distorted memories of her childhood begin to bleed into her consciousness. In the car, Hiromi resolves to be the anchor for Aiko, wanting to give her the home and the smile she's been desperately searching for. Deep in her dissociative fugue, Aiko feels her own identity slipping away, realizing she isn't even sure who Aiko Hosho is anymore. The dream reveals a vision of a woman knitting a small sweater with Aiko's name on it, a tender memory from a life lost to tragedy. Yuriko smiles gently as she shows off her handiwork, oblivious to the monstrous shadow that is about to destroy their happiness. Aiko hears a man's agonizing voice echoing from within her, describing a pain like a python constricting his very soul. In the memory, Yuriko stays by the man's side, offering warmth and comfort even as his body begins to fail him. Despite his physical torment, the man's mind is filled with a strange, final calm as he accepts his fate in this small, quiet room. Aiko realizes these aren't her own memories, but the raw emotions and sensations of the monster that now lives inside her. The peaceful vision is violently shattered by a deafening crash as the past and present collide in a storm of terror. Aiko's subconscious screams as her body feels like it's being torn apart, the sensation of her transformation manifesting in the dream. A massive, dark chimera silhouette looms out of the darkness, letting out a guttural roar that vibrates through Aiko's very bones. The nightmare peaks as the monster turns its violence on Yuriko, and Aiko's child self can only watch in paralyzed horror. The monster's voice commands Aiko to flee, its actions driven by a primal, confused instinct to protect what it loves by destroying it. As the vision fades, Aiko reflects on the extreme exhaustion and weakness that defined the monster's tragic existence. She wonders if the curse of being a chimera justifies such immense suffering, even for a soul that was once kind and innocent. The dream shifts to the night of the incident at her foster home, where her mother finds Aiko awake at the door in the middle of the night. A hooded, desperate figure, the chimera that was once her father, appears at the door, claiming it is Aiko's 16th birthday. Confusion and fear grip the foster mother as she argues about the date, unaware that she is speaking to a man who has lost his humanity. The hooded man's control snaps as his transformation begins again, his agonized scream echoing through the quiet neighborhood. A monstrous shadow looms over the house, and the foster parents' screams of terror signal the beginning of a blood-soaked massacre. The monster's shadow falls across the hallway, a harbinger of the violent end of Aiko's stolen childhood. In the memory, child Aiko watches as the monster kills the only parents she ever knew, her world ending in a single brutal night. The monster stands over the remains of her family, a silent testament to the uncontrollable rage of the chimera virus. The carnage is absolute, leaving child Aiko alone in the rubble of her life, her spirit broken by the senseless violence. Amidst the ruins, Aiko whispers that she doesn't want to die like this, her fear of the monster competing with her desire to survive. In the dream, the older Aiko faces her child self, her eyes burning with a mix of grief and an awakening, vengeful power. Her monstrous left arm twitches with a life of its own as the memories of that night fuel the transformation she's always feared. Aiko confronts the entity within her, accusing it of murdering everyone she loved, her foster parents, and her biological mother, Yuriko. Despite her overwhelming hatred, Aiko breaks down in tears, realizing the twisted truth. The monster was only trying to protect her. The scene shifts back to reality at the Atheos high-security facility, an imposing fortress designed to keep its biological secrets hidden. Inside, Kochigawa looks out the window, sensing that the fragile peace within the organization is about to be shattered. Kochigawa receives an urgent report. Agent Sudo has vanished from his quarters, leaving the board to suspect he's gone rogue. Sensing a conspiracy, Kochigawa orders a full search for Sudo, suspecting someone else is pulling the strings behind his odd behavior. Outside the gates, Hiromi observes the facility through binoculars, noting that the security is tighter than usual. Sarah and Hiromi finalize their infiltration plan, deciding to use an underground waterway that leads directly to the basement machinery rooms. They prepare to hit the battlefield, knowing that once they step onto Atheos property, there is no turning back. Sudo and Hiromi enter the dark industrial tunnel of the waterway, spotting a distant light that marks their path into the facility. Hiromi makes his way through the facility's underbelly, the rumble of machinery overhead signaling just how close they are to the main rooms and Aiko. At a high-stakes press conference, journalists grill the Atheos officials about claims of media spin and information suppression, leaving Chief Usui to manage the growing PR disaster. Feeling the heat of the shitstorm, Chief Usui takes a call about the rogue agent Sudo and, in a fit of pure frustration, completely crushes his phone. Director Okuda faces the cameras, forced to address an increasing number of eyewitness reports claiming the criminals involved in recent incidents were actually non-human monsters. Okuda remains stoic, dismissing the monstrous claims as unsubstantiated conjecture while trying to maintain the organization's professional facade. The official is pushed further. If biomonsters are really on the loose, then Atheos itself must become the target of an intensive investigation. From his own monitor, a sharp-eyed observer mocks the executive's cunning performance. While back at the precinct, officers realize Chief Usui has vanished. Director Okuda sits in the shadows of the executive boardroom, where the chairman notes that the public scrutiny has effectively tied their hands for the moment. Deep inside the facility, Sudo and Hiromi pry open a heavy, rusted metal hatch, their entry marked by the loud, metallic clanging of an unauthorized break-in. They step into a massive, cavernous chamber, and Hiromi is instantly stunned by the sheer scale of the horrific technology they've stumbled upon. Looking into a glowing preservation vat, Hiromi realizes the gruesome truth. Atheos hasn't just been studying chimeras, they've been breeding them. Sudo documents the evidence with his camera, noting that they found the heart of the operation as they prepare to move deeper into the basement. They encounter a towering organic structure that looks less like a machine and more like a grotesque altar from a horror film. Sudo realizes director Okuda is far from finished with his work. The massive apparatus proves that a much larger, darker experiment is currently underway. The organic machine hums with a sickening life as it prepares for whatever final evolution Okuda has planned for his subjects. Hiromi spots a familiar figure and rushes toward a medical platform, his heart sinking as he calls out Aiko's name. Aiko lies there, pale and seemingly lifeless, her body hooked into the massive machine's intricate network of cables and tubes. Hiromi checks her pulse, relieved to find she's still breathing, and desperately begs her to wake up and see that help has finally arrived. Aiko opens her eyes in a daze, barely recognizing her rescuers, while Hiromi's anger boils over at the sight of what's been done to her. Sudo tells Hiromi to focus on getting Aiko out while he handles the critical task of copying the facility's data onto his laptop. Hiromi warns Sudo that a single keystroke might alert security, just as the sound of approaching footsteps echoes through the chamber. Dr. Kochigawa steps into the room, her gaze fixed on the machine as she whispers to a presence she calls Mother, claiming they are almost at the finish line. Kochigawa finally notices the intruders, looking down at Sudo and Hiromi with a clinical detachment that only fuels their outrage. Sudo stares her down, his hands trembling with fury as he demands to know exactly what she's done to Aiko in the name of her twisted research. Kochigawa stands in the lab, explaining that Aiko's mental retreat was caused by the realization that the chimeras she's been hunting were once human. She tells Hiromi that he's the only person who can reach Aiko now, urging him to be the hero she needs. Kochigawa draws her weapon on Sudo as he tries to carry the unconscious Aiko to safety, refusing to let them leave. Suddenly, Yujiro Sera appears behind the doctor with his own gun drawn, suggesting they all find a way out of this mess together. Sera brings up a man from 5 years ago who tried to expose the organization's dark secrets. Kochigawa remembers that researcher well, and the regret that followed when he was eventually eliminated. She mocks the men, calling them fools, and revealing that she's actually one of the masterminds behind the entire operation. Sera doesn't seem impressed by her claim, meeting her gaze with a calm, steady smile. He drops his cover, revealing his true identity as Yuji Oumi, a former member of the Atheos Intelligence Division. He tells her the organization stole everything from him before moving in to seize control of the situation. Kochigawa is paralyzed as Oumi holds her at gunpoint, claiming he's only stopping her from digging her own grave any deeper. Omi tells Sudo to take Aiko and get out of the facility while he has the chance. The sound of a rifle clicking echoes through the room, stopping everyone in their tracks. Director Okuda arrives with a security detail, expressing his sheer disappointment in Kochigawa's failure to maintain order. Kochigawa is visibly shaken by the director's sudden appearance, as the mood in the room turns lethal. Okuda laments how even his own executive board has betrayed him, intending to make him the scapegoat for their failures. The director makes it clear he won't tolerate any more interference with the project's final stages. He unveils a horrific biomechanical device designed to fuse with a second-generation chimera to create a new goddess. He plans for Aiko to be the core of this monstrous creation, a reveal that leaves Sudo reeling. A heavy strike catches Sudo off guard, sending him sprawling across the floor with a dull thud. Okuda steps over him, deciding to use Sudo's pain as a trigger to see if it can force Aiko back to reality. The director prepares his weapon, fueled by a cold, calculating rage. Okuda doesn't hesitate, firing several shots into Sudo's prone body. He mocks Aiko for still not waking up, even as her protector is being gunned down right in front of her. Sudo gasps for breath through the agony, his vision blurring as he loses more blood. He watches Aiko's still face, thinking it would be more merciful if she stayed asleep and never saw what they were planning to do to her. Adding insult to injury, Okuda tells Sudo that his mother passed away earlier that morning. Okuda shifts the blame onto Sudo, claiming his abandonment of her is what truly killed her. Aiko remains motionless, but a scream for help echoes through the void of her subconscious. Her eyes suddenly fly open, sharp and full of renewed awareness. Deep within her mind, Aiko hears someone crying and follows the sound to a child version of herself. She reaches out, realizing she's no longer afraid of the darkness, as her fingers begin to twitch in the real world. A brilliant light signals her return to the waking world. She finds herself looking down at the dying Sudo, realizing the sobbing she heard was actually coming from him. Aiko looks at him with a soft, gentle smile, addressing him as Sudo-san. She's fully awake and sitting up on the surgery table, watching him through the glass. Sudo is speechless, staring at her in disbelief as his strength fades. Aiko tells him that hearing his heartbroken sobs was what finally brought her back. Sudo slumps forward, the massive pool of blood beneath him showing just how little time he has left. Okuda is impressed that Sudo managed to snap her out of her catatonic state, even as Sudo weakly asks what they've done to her. Kochigawa explains she used a chemical cocktail to ensure Aiko remains unable to control her own physical movements. Okuda stands over her, assigning Aiko her first task and demanding her absolute obedience. Director Okuda looms over Aiko, expecting her to follow his lead, but she's done taking orders. She screams at the director, making it clear she refuses to be used as a weapon any longer. Okuda remains unfazed, telling her that personal feelings have no place in his grand vision for the future. He rants about a rotten world that needs to be destroyed, with Aiko serving as the goddess who will birth a new human race. The director admits his hatred for humanity started with his own father, a man he came to detest above all others. A flashback reveals a 5-year-old Okuda during the war, living in constant fear while his father developed nuclear weapons. He recounts the night foreign soldiers burst into their home, searching for the scientist who built the bomb that killed thousands. Unable to find his father, the soldiers murdered his mother right in front of him as an act of revenge. Young Okuda was left to hold his mother's corpse for 3 days before his father finally returned home. After the war, his father shifted to medical research, but every human test subject ended up turning into a monster. As a student, Okuda witnessed other chemists celebrating the horrific results of the experiments as marvelous human weapons. The callous way they toyed with lives disgusted him, solidifying his view that humanity was beyond redemption. He notes that even now, the members of the executive board are still giddy about their progress in chimera development. Sudo calls out the Goddess Project as just another weapon, but Okuda insists she will enact divine punishment on tainted sinners. Okuda reveals that the woman who was used in the project before was the only one he ever loved, besides his own mother. Sudo isn't interested in his tragic backstory, telling the director to die alone and keep his ridiculous schemes away from Aiko. Okuda coldly tells Sudo he's fired and that his time is up, raising a pistol to finish him off. A deafening shot rings out, and Sudo is hit. Sudo takes the bullet and falls, while Okuda is genuinely surprised that the investigator can still move at all. Aiko shouts Sudo's name in a panic, desperate to reach him before it's too late. Okuda tells her that taking her anger out on others won't bring back what she's lost or satisfy her pain. He declares that everyone will pay for their crimes as he levels his gun for another shot. He calls Aiko a monster, but she doesn't flinch, her expression hardening with resolve. She tells him his words don't hurt her anymore. She's heard it all before. Aiko issues a chilling threat, telling Okuda she'll kill him if he tries to take anything else from her. She declares she'll become whatever she needs to be to protect the person precious to her. The standoff is interrupted by a blaring alarm, and Okuda demands to know what's going on. A frantic guard bursts in, reporting that an unknown army has broken through the facility's gate. Okuda gets a call from the chairman, who calmly informs him that he's coming to take Aiko off his hands. The director sees the invading force on the monitors and orders his men to open fire on the intruders. A brutal gunfight erupts in the hallways as the tactical team pushes through the facility's defenses. Okuda panics as he realizes they're heading straight for the lab, screaming at his men to capture Aiko immediately. Yujiro Seta tells Sudo they have to move, but Sudo is too injured and tells them to save themselves. Kochigawa urges him to stay alive for Aiko's sake, refusing to abandon him in the chaos. A massive explosion rocks the facility, sending shockwaves through the lab as the structure begins to fail. Debris rains down from the ceiling as the group is caught in the middle of the destruction. Amidst the smoke and falling rocks, a new figure appears. It's Sudo's chief, leading the rescue effort. He tells them to get moving, noting that Sudo has already lost a dangerous amount of blood. Sudo tells the chief he already knew the truth about his mother, and that her death was her own fight. The chief places a hand on his shoulder, telling him to be proud of her for hanging on as long as she did. Aiko helps Sudo up, telling him that hanging his head won't help them get out of this alive. Sudo looks at her and manages a weak smile, grateful that she's the one pulling him through. Sudo leans heavily on Aiko, admitting it's embarrassing that he was the one who ended up needing a rescue. They stand amidst the devastation of the laboratory, the facility now reduced to rubble and twisted metal. Kochigawa and the representative check on Sudo, but he insists he's fine, even as he struggles to stand. Across the room, Director Okuda's guards scramble for cover as a series of secondary explosions rocks the chamber. Okuda staggers toward the burning remains of his goddess, reaching out for his life's work as it turns to ash. Kochigawa watches with a cold gaze, telling him flatly that the dream is over and his creation isn't coming back to life. She raises her handgun, aiming it directly at her father. She tells Okuda that his failure was a foregone conclusion from the very beginning. The director's face twists with desperation as he pleads with her, claiming they can still resurrect his mother if they continue the Chimera research. Kochigawa remains unmoved by his emotional plea. She tells him all he ever truly wanted was to play God and see his own twisted research reach fruition. It's a bitter irony that Okuda's own daughter is his undoing. He admits the first person he ever truly hated was his own father. Kochigawa's eyes are empty as she utters a final, cold farewell to the man who ruined her life. Behind her, the massive biological core erupts in a final, violent burst of flame and debris. Aiko's resolve hardens into something lethal. She makes a vow. If anyone tries to take another thing from her, she'll kill them. She begins to walk away from the carnage, her bare feet stepping over the rubble. She's done trying to repress the monster inside her. The representative reports that the situation topside is even worse, and with the tunnel blocked, their only escape is a direct path upward. Aiko hauls Sudo onto her shoulder, preparing to smash through anything in their way. Sudo notes that a frontal assault is quite a tall order. They reach a stairwell that has become a literal river of blood, littered with the bodies of those caught in the crossfire. The representative grips his rifle, his expression grim. He tells them there's no time for anything except surviving. More soldiers spot them from above, their weapons clicking as they prepare to open fire on the fugitives. Aiko hurls herself into the fray, her movements a blur of violence as blood sprays across the walls. The stairwell erupts into a hail of gunfire as the representative provides cover, shouting over the noise. Stray bullets graze those around him, but the representative focuses on clearing a path for Aiko and the wounded Sudo. Aiko screams for the killing to stop, but her plea is lost in the roar of combat and the smell of gunpowder. Her left arm begins to mutate violently, the flesh tearing and warping into a massive, jagged claw. She looks down at her transformation, the physical and mental strain more visceral than ever before. With Sudo clinging to her, she charges up the stairs, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. Back in the heart of the facility, the fires have consumed the lab, and Director Okuda lies motionless among the wreckage. Kochigawa stands amidst the smoke as Yujiro Seta approaches her, telling her it's time to move before the whole place comes down. Kochigawa looks down at her father's body one last time, her expression a mask of exhaustion and grief. Sarah hands her a weapon, insisting she take it as they prepare to fight their way out of the collapsing base. They reach a security door, and Kochigawa pauses for a brief moment, reflecting on the horror they've left behind. Sarah tells her to hurry, They need to reach the exit before the entire sector is sealed off. Kochigawa reveals she has already activated the self-destruct sequence, determined that the sin of their research ends here. She reflects on Director Okuda, noting that for all his talk of power, he was a man who could never stand being alone. Sarah looks at her with a mix of respect and regret, never imagining their final meeting would be like this. He turns and walks toward the exit, leaving the past and the dying facility behind them. A military helicopter circles the facility overhead. High-ranking officers report to the chairman that they've been unable to capture Aiko Haosho. Inside a blood-spattered corridor, Aiko stands over a pile of mangled corpses, the scale of the slaughter truly horrifying. Sudo, slumped against the wall and trembling, calls out to the representative, begging him to stop Aiko before she's lost forever. Aiko stands in a daze, covered from head to toe in gore. She looks less like a girl and more like the monster Okuda wanted her to be. Her hands twitch as she looks down at the blood coating her skin, her mind reeling from the violence she's unleashed. Sudo looks at her, his heart breaking. He sees a girl lost in a deeper insanity than even Okuda, and more violent than any soldier they've ever faced. Aiko is overwhelmed by her own instability, weeping as the weight of her monstrous nature finally breaks her spirit. Sudo leans back against the cold stone, looking at her with a gentle sadness. He asks her what she wants to reach for once this nightmare is finally behind them. He tells her that despite everything, she has the power to do anything she wants with her life. Aiko looks down, still unsure if she has a place in the world. Sudo's only wish is simple. He wants to see her smile again. He wants to see the girl he first met, not the weapon the world tried to make her. They share a quiet moment of connection amidst the rubble, the violence of the facility feeling miles away for just a few seconds. Sudo reaches out to her, asking for a promise. He wants her to keep moving forward, no matter how hard things get. Aiko clutches her head, her sobs muffled as Sudo tries to comfort her one last time. Outside the facility, a sniper confirms the target. The order is given, and the cold click of a trigger signals the end of their brief peace. A massive blast tears through the wall, sending a shockwave of heat and light through the room. Dust and debris rain down as Aiko looks up, seeing the first real sunlight she's seen in days pouring through the gap. She begins to crawl towards the opening, desperate for a taste of freedom, while Sudo and the representative watch from the shadows. Sudo senses the danger and shouts for her to wait, his voice filled with a sudden, sharp panic. Before she can reach the light, a jagged black spike erupts from the darkness, impaling Aiko through the chest. Sudo's world shatters as he watches her get struck. A spray of blood marks the sudden, brutal end to their escape. A squad of heavily armed soldiers in gas masks emerges from the breach, their weapons trained on the survivors. Sudo lets out a guttural scream for Aiko as the soldiers open fire, the rapid chatter of a machine gun filling the air. Without a second thought, Sudo throws himself over Aiko's broken body, using himself as a human shield against the incoming hail of lead. The bullets tear into him, but he refuses to let go, holding her tight even as the life begins to drain out of him. The gunfire finally stops. Aiko stares in shock at Sudo, who is now slumped over her, his shirt soaked in red. He struggles to breathe, his voice a mere whisper as he calls out her name one last time. Aiko cradles his head, tears streaming down her face, as Sudo gives her one final, peaceful smile. He goes limp in her arms, leaving Aiko alone in the ruins of the facility that took everything from her. She remembers the day they met, how he yelled at her to live, and how he insisted that her life had meaning as long as she kept moving. Looking at his cold face, Aiko finally forces a broken, tearful smile, fulfilling his last wish as the chapter comes to a tragic close. Hosho Aiko is losing it. She clutches Sudo's limp body as she lets out a raw, desperate scream. Sudo's back is a mess from the blast. She's howling now, her voice cracking under the weight of it all. Director Okuda just stands there, watching the fallout of his handiwork with a cold, clinical stare. She doesn't stop. Every bit of her agony is pouring out in that one endless cry. Her eyes are bloodshot, tears mixing with the grime on her face. The word hurts is the only thing left in her head. The Atheos soldiers close in, their rifles leveled. She can feel something inside her chest about to snap. Aiko stands up, looking like a different person. She decides that even dying won't make this pain go away. She lunges. The soldiers don't even have time to react before she's on them with that monstrous claw. One strike and it's over for the first guy. She's moving with a speed that shouldn't be possible. She screams for them to die, her arm cutting through the air like a blade. It's a complete slaughter. She jumps into the thick of them, tearing through their formation. Her face is a mask of pure, unbridled rage. There's no trace of the girl left. A massive shockwave hits the room as she unleashes everything she has. She slams her claw down, crushing anything in her path. She's like a wild animal now, ripping through tactical gear like it's paper. Covered in blood, the realization hits. The pain is the only thing she can feel. The soldiers fall one by one. She isn't just fighting. She's erasing them. Standing among the ruins, she mutters that it's not enough. Not even close. The surviving guards scramble for the exit, screaming for backup. They know they're looking at a monster. She stands in the rain, head bowed. She realizes that everyone was right about what she really is. Surrounded by the results of her frenzy, the word monster finally fits. A single tear of blood rolls down her cheek as she stares into the void. She thinks she could take on all the filth in the world and still want more. The hunger is bottomless. She feels like she could devour everything in sight. She lets out another guttural roar. Even destroying the whole world wouldn't satisfy this craving. A massive, grotesque shape erupts from her back as she fully gives in to the transformation. Pseudo is barely hanging on. He hears her voice echoing through the chaos. Director Okuda watches the horror unfold. He admits that her voice is the saddest thing he's ever heard. The facility is a graveyard. Bodies and wreckage are scattered everywhere. The countdown hits 0. Aiko gives one final, earth-shaking scream before the end. A massive pillar of light consumes the facility. Everything is gone in an instant. The world goes dark. She feels herself slipping back into consciousness. Her younger self sits alone in a white void, curled up in a ball. Then she hears it. A voice calling her name, pulling her back from the edge. She looks up, realizing the voice is coming from the other side. A kind, warm light starts to break through the darkness. Visions of a life she lost flash before her eyes. A family, a warm bed, a peaceful home. She starts chasing that light, leaving the loneliness of the dark behind. No matter how small the light is, she knows it's there, waiting for her. The faces of the people she met appear. Pseudo is there, smiling at her. Aiko reaches out one last time, desperate to touch that warmth before it fades. Pseudo's hand gently pats her head. She wakes up in the ruins, the nightmare finally over. Haosho Aiko lies motionless in the center of the total destruction. The laboratory is gone, and the silence is finally deafening. Her eyes slowly flutter open as she feels a gentle touch. The nightmare of the transformation is over, leaving her exhausted and broken in the ruins. High above, the dark, heavy clouds begin to break, and a soft rain starts to fall over the graveyard of twisted metal. She reaches her hand out into the cool air, letting the rain wash over her skin as she realizes she's still alive. She lets out a quiet, shaky breath, the morning light finally reaching her after the longest night of her life. Pseudo is right there beside her, his hand resting on her head in a quiet, comforting gesture of protection. She looks up at the silhouette of the man who saved her, a faint, genuine smile touching her lips for the first time. The sun finally breaks through the gloom, bathing the wreckage in a warm, hopeful light as the dawn arrives. Days later, the news cycle is dominated by the fall of Atheos. The entire world watches as their horrific experiments are finally exposed. On the busy street corners, People stand frozen in shock, unable to believe the monsters that were living right under their noses. Yujiro Sera walks through the crowd with a cigarette in his mouth, the stoic architect of a truth the world wasn't ready to hear. Far off in the distance, smoke still rises from the facility, but the city around it continues to move forward into a new era. Life returns to normal in the heart of Shibuya, the sun shining down on the bustling commercial district. Thousands of people cross the streets, completely unaware of the battles fought in the shadows to protect their peace. Among the crowd, a girl in a simple white summer dress walks alone, her hair catching the light as she blends in. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out her name, and Aiko stops in her tracks as the world around her seems to stand still. She starts to turn, her expression softening as she realizes who is calling for her. Hosho Aiko turns all the way around and gives a bright, beautiful smile, finally free to live as the person she was always meant to be.